We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Antry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. If you're looking at YouTube, there's no Tom video, and that's for a very, very good reason this week. There's more than one thing keeping Tom's video away this week. Honestly, Tom, you shouldn't even be here. I don't know why you're pushing yourself this hard, but here he is, using the same mic as last week, not because that was the plan, but just because that is what works right now. What the heck's going on, Tom?
Oh, like nothing really exciting is going on in my life. There was a hurricane.
Yes.
Which everyone said, like, we didn't talk about it last week, because all of last week they're like, oh, it's not even going to hit Florida. It's going to go up the East Coast. It's going to skirt it. We might get a little bit of wind. Literally heard people, and I'm talking about professional weathercaster people, say, don't change your weekend plans.
Right.
Everything's going to be fine. And we were like, okay, well, that's fine. I wasn't even thinking about it. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, the weather models have changed. It's coming into the bay. You're all going to die. Jesus.
This is Debbie, right? Tropical storm Debbie that's taking place, I think is the one.
Yeah. And honestly, we're kind of prepared. You guys have heard the number of times I've had hurricanes or storms come through.
Yeah.
We're kind of prepared for it around here. It's not, there's a lot of PTSD in this neighborhood, in my particular neighborhood, because last year we had that really bad couple of back-to-back storms. One didn't even have a name. It wasn't bad enough to get a name. We call it the no-name storm. That's what they call it. That came through during King Tide, which. Right. If you don't know what King Tide is and you think that must be something they talk about on the coast or near water, I don't. I'd never heard of it until then. So you're not alone. It is when the tide pull is the very, very strongest. That's what I call it, the King Tide. It is when the water is super high. Like, I would notice it. Mm-hmm. Like, man, the flooding's bad in the neighborhood. It wouldn't even rain. Like, where's all this water coming from? And I never thought about it. Well, King Tide is when the tide is super, super high. And then we had a storm come through that was not a hurricane, not a tropical storm. It was just a storm.
Yeah.
And it flooded a ton of homes in our neighborhood, like a ton of them. So, and you may be one of those unempathetic people who are like, oh, well, you bought a home there, you deserve it. Well, I'm going to remember that when your fire burns down your house or whatever. But so anyways, Debbie came through. We're kind of prepared for that. The neighbors have been all freaking out. A lot of them. The Facebook page is just full of people angry at other people for driving through the water and pushing the water into their houses.
Right.
Which, not only are they mad at people for doing that, because there's mostly people, and by people I mean Jeep owners, but some other cars are doing it as well. Yeah. I will say, I have been driving a Jeep. My friend has a Jeep, and we're having car issues right now.
Yes.
And he lent me his Jeep, so now I'm driving around this Jeep. And if you own a Jeep, I see the appeal, okay? I don't understand why your car has to break down, like, all the time, but it is a kind of fun car to drive. I will give you that. You have no excuse, though, for not being able to park that thing straight, because, oh my God, it's the most maneuverable car I've ever been in. It's like driving a go-kart.
That must be the problem. It's the overcorrection. Yeah. Overcorrection.
I have actually overcorrected once, but that's just me. Anyways, so they're also mad at the relief vehicles that are coming in here. The people that are coming in to do the power. Like, anybody that goes to the street, they're mad at them. So, all in all, the storm was not that bad. We didn't lose power for that long.
Okay.
We didn't get any water in the house. We were just trapped inside our house from, like, Saturday night. Well, I guess technically Saturday afternoon, all the way through, like, really late last night, which was Monday. So we were kind of trapped inside with water surrounding our house. I sent Rob a picture, but that picture is not the highest. That was when the water was receding. It was actually a couple hours later, maybe 4 or 5 hours later, and we could drive out.
Yeah, it's the unintentional moat.
Yes. And I'll be honest with you. Politically, I didn't mind that so much.
Would have been good to have the drawbridge to go over it, though. Yeah.
I didn't have any way of getting out.
Right.
The other fun thing that really compounded all the fun of this is Friday, I started feeling bad, feeling sick. So I stayed home from work and slept. And then Saturday, I was like, oh, I still feel bad. And I contracted COVID. So I have been sequestered in my bedroom by myself watching the Olympics. We signed up for Peacock, which I will give a review of again. Okay. My yearly review of Peacock, or my every 4 years review, 3 years in this case, review of Peacock for when I signed up for it for the stupid Olympics. I will tell you how much that app has improved in just a few minutes. But yes, I am in my bedroom on the Audi's Maxwell gaming headset again. I do not have the the noise suppression on because people didn't like that as much. We got some overall pretty good responses from it. Some people liked some things, some people didn't like some things. This week we will do all the noise suppression and
we're not evaluating the mic this time.
This time you will get it. So you got to remember, for our mics, we do all this compression and noise suppression and everything else to make sure there's nothing else in the room that's affecting it. For when I did this mic review, I didn't do any of that, so that you heard just the mic itself and not me fixing the sound to make it sound as good as possible. So this week it might sound a little bit better, might sound a little bit worse. I don't know. You'll have to tell us. But yes, so I am sick still. I tested. I started having symptoms on Friday. I tested positive on Saturday. Saturday afternoon or evening, and then now I'm just sort of congested, coughing, and I feel okay now. This is not the worst. I have contracted COVID way too much for somebody who
kidding.
really tried to be very careful about all this stuff. I'll be honest with you. I should not play the lottery because I do not have the luck that,
and just
that
the
I should.
Fact that having COVID was not the top news this week as far as what's going on in Tom's life. That's the secondary news story. So
so my wife's working from home. My kids are home. I'm trapped in the bedroom. Luckily I have old enough kids that, because I was feeling real bad Saturday, and that's when they put sandbags up and stuff, and they did all that really, really well. So I was pleased about that. But it's going to be, it's going to be another week before I'm really, not a week, I mean maybe 3 or 4 days before I'm COVID testing negative, hopefully, and I can get back out of the house. I know a lot of people are like, well, after a certain point you're not, the so and so says you're not contagious. Yeah, I'm just going to wait anyways.
Right.
How about that?
Well,
how about I live in Florida, and even though a lot of them don't align with me politically, there's a ton of old people around here, and maybe I don't want to go around trying to kill them because they decided not to get vaccinated, including my parents, by the way.
Right.
My mom did not get vaccinated, so I am not leaving the house until I know that I'm definitely not going to kill her.
That would be a good plan.
Yes. So, yes, I have been trapped inside the house. I have to look up. I did watch some things.
Okay.
I actually watched a movie or a show, but I did watch some other stuff. But
quite to that section yet. And just want to say, as far as AVRant stuff goes, I do want to give our thanks to James and Infinite Gary, who wrote in via email to give some feedback on that Maxwell gaming headset. James clearly prefers Tom's regular mic, but said this one, not too bad. And Infinite Gary thought that the lower frequencies are overboosted. And I can just chime in and say, when I was editing the video version to put up on YouTube last week, I did apply compression on it after the first 6 minutes, because for the first 6 minutes, we were basically just letting you hear exactly what the mic does all on its own without any post-processing, but then I put some post-processing on it after the first 6 minutes just so that it would be a little bit more pleasant and our levels would be a little bit more matched between Tom and myself. Well, I mean, normally it's quite easy, but that microphone definitely is doing some particular frequency band cuts and without the noise cancellation of the microphone on, just inherently doing some frequency band cuts, and is not linear because depending on which playback system I used while mastering the levels there, I got some pretty wide-ranging results. And the final video, when I heard it through my iPhone speakers, like just the built-in speakers on my iPhone, I was like, still didn't quite nail it. Didn't find the exact perfect compromise. So there are going to be some challenges again this week using that same microphone. But yeah, I didn't go through and write down all the screen names from the YouTube comments that we got on it, because I don't know who you actually are, your real names, because it's all YouTube comment names. But in general, most people seem to agree that, yeah, it's pretty okay, and especially pretty darn good for a gaming headset mic. So there we go.
Okay, so the last thing on all of that is that there is a mute button on this, and I think I did it last week, but I'm doing it again right now. I'm going to turn the mute button on right now. You should hear it click.
Okay. Yeah, that was definitely audible, the muting button.
You will not hear it come back on when I turn it off.
Yeah, I didn't.
When I turn it on, it has a soft turn on, which I think is good. I wish there was a soft turn off too somehow, but I don't know how they could do that.
That would be beneficial.
But there's a very good chance you're going to hear that happen multiple times throughout this podcast, because
Tom has COVID,
coughing and sneezing, and I'm barely holding myself together as it is right now. So,
oh boy,
what did you watch, Rob?
Alrighty, well, of course, Olympics are on, so I did not watch 2 movies this week. I had sort of intended to watch the one movie that I did watch twice, because what I did watch was The Fall Guy, the new 2024 movie, Ryan Gosling, Emily Blunt, based on the 1980s TV series kind of loosely. Like, they took the title and they took the idea that he is a Hollywood stuntman, but that's kind of about it. That's kind of about as far as they got. The character names also taken there from the Lee Majors show that was back in the 80s. But I watched the extended.
I remember watching that show.
Right.
I remember that show being on TV.
I never did watch that show, so it wasn't as though I was going to be upset by them changing the adaptation or anything like that. But I watched the extended edition of this movie, which most people online were saying was the better version. But I had sort of intended to, watch the theatrical cut so I could do a bit of a comparison, but I didn't have time and didn't get around to it. So I don't actually know how much was changed. Apparently there's like about 20 minutes extra footage in the extended edition. And people were saying that quite a bit of that is the stunt scenes. So it was well worth, in most people's opinion, seeing the extended edition, because this is very much a movie that is about the stunts. So here's the thing. I think I respected this movie more than I liked just the movie itself. Because I feel like in a lot of ways, this movie was almost of two minds. It's a very meta movie. It is a movie about the movie industry and about stunt workers, and also about writing an adaptation and people coming up through the Hollywood system, having started under the line and becoming a director and becoming a stunt coordinator and moving up in the industry. And so it's like commenting on all of that. And then the characters in the movie are commenting about that in their situation, but as though they're in a movie, like not quite breaking the fourth wall, but just getting right up to that line of breaking the fourth wall, and talking about how the movie that they're making within the movie is having script problems that are mimicking what's going on in the movie that we're watching right now. So it's all of this very meta commentary that's going on. And I feel like the sort of two-mind split that I mentioned is that this is very much a love letter to stunts and to the people who work so hard at doing the stunts. And the producers and the directors of this movie were like, yeah, we are doing these stunts practically. We are not going to use CGI except for, removing wires, of course, things like that, replacing the green screen that is still used on things. Of course, they're going to do that. But not having the people replaced by digital doubles, not having the explosions be all computer generated. All of that stuff is going to be filmed in camera, making a point of that on the movie. But then the other side is they were still trying to be somewhat paying an homage to the 1980s TV show. And in that show, a lot of what Lee Majors' character was doing was run and gun. He would because in the TV show he was a bounty hunter, and that's not the case in this movie. Ryan Gosling playing the same character name is not a bounty hunter in this movie, but he does sort of moonlight as other things besides being a stuntman. And it's like, Lee Majors' version would show up on set and like not really know what was happening in the movie and just be like thrown into a stunt and have to like do it by the skin of his teeth, and he's just so skilled as a stuntman that he could do that. And so they still did that in this movie. They still had Ryan Gosling just like show up, and he hasn't read the script and he doesn't know what the stunt is, and they're like, but we're shooting it in 5 minutes, go. And I'm like, that is completely unrealistic. There is nothing the least bit realistic about that on a modern day movie set. And this isn't like it's set in the, early part of Hollywood history where there was crazy stuff that happened on sets like that. It's like, no, modern day movies have a huge amount of planning that goes into stunts like these. And there's like real life behind the scenes footage of everything they did to shoot this movie, The Fall Guy.
Yeah. There's meetings and meetings and meetings and meetings.
Oh, and I mean the rehearsal and the safety checks and like everything that it goes through. And actually that documentary stuff is like super interesting. I wouldn't have minded if that was the movie, but I also really wouldn't have minded. And honestly, I think it actually might have worked better with the script if the issues that were going on in the fictitious movie that's being shot in this movie was about how much planning had to go into the stunts. Like, that could have worked in this script every bit as well as what the movie actually was. So that's what I mean. Like, there was this weird disconnect. I had this conundrum in my head where I'm like, I super respect this movie, like what they actually made in this movie, and it is entertaining. And honestly, I think a lot of the part that I enjoyed the most was the romance and the chemistry between Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt, like, which weren't the stunts, but I think I maybe enjoyed that part of this movie the most just as a viewer. But I mean, the stunts that they did in this were incredible. So much work went into that, and yet it was like modern movie editing where you barely got to see so much of what was going on in those stunts. And then there was one extended sequence where they just did all this weird, like, camera speed ramping and super rapid cuts, and it actually made the stunts look bad in that moment. He's at this moment, he was like, unknowingly to him, he got drugged, so he's like seeing things, and everything feels
so they
weird
try to show that with the camera movements and everything, yeah.
But it didn't pay off, and I'm not going to like criticize filmmakers for trying something and one scene didn't happen to pay off, but it was like a really long, extended, and very important scene. I'm like, ooh, I really wish I could have seen what just happened then, but you like jerked the camera around so much and changed the speed so much that I couldn't even see this amazing stunt that these people are doing and doing for real. They obviously in the credits, like, pay more attention to the stunt workers than you normally see in the credits of the movie, because this is a movie about stunt people. So yeah, it's really tough for me, because I what I can say is I wanted to love this movie more than I think I genuinely did, like, just strictly as a viewer, because of how much I respected what they were doing. And there is a lot to love here. But I just felt the end product of like, oh, you didn't quite make sense. And I really wish that they had gone much more into the real life planning that does take place. Like I said, it totally could have worked. So it's also kind of funny. Aaron Taylor Johnson is playing the actual star of the fictitious movie. Ryan Gosling is his stuntman. And of course, it's kind of hilarious that everyone's like, well, we don't want to see Ryan Gosling's face. We're supposed to see the face of the star of the thing. And I'm like, but he's still Ryan Gosling. I'm like, so there's that kind of, you have to suspend your disbelief that Ryan Gosling in this universe is not considered good looking by everyone that he's working with, which is kind of hilarious. And then, yeah, the, all the jokes that they're doing and how much this movie is like, just down to the last minute. And like they do have this humorous pyrotechnics coordinator who he does love to test his stuff, but a little too much, to the point that he's left like one pyrotechnic for the actual shot because he's tested all the others before they start shooting. So unrealistic stuff like that, but which is all played for comedy, but at the same time, when you're trying to make a movie about making a movie and being a love letter, it's like, well, it's kind of weird that you have all this unrealistic stuff in it. So yeah, I'm a little bit split on it. I wish I loved it more, but I do respect it tremendously, and it is well worth a watch. I mean, this is absolutely a home theater movie because there are tons of stunts and action scenes and explosions and wild stuff.
Right. So I've been trapped in my bedroom, watching on my computer screen off my nightstand with the Olympics on the Peacock app, which we will talk about momentarily.
Okay.
And I'm also using the Soundcore Space X600, like portable Bluetooth speaker to augment the sound because
right. Yeah.
the computer speakers don't really get loud enough for a lot of this stuff. So, Olympics have been fine. I've been watching just some of the most, I call them obscure, but they're not really obscure sports. It's just obscure to me because I've never watched them before. I tried to watch judo, which I've never watched before. I just didn't get it. Like, I understand. Yeah,
it's a little bit tough with the penalties and understanding why it was a penalty and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I didn't quite understand like why some point things were scored and not, and all of that. So I honestly, I wasn't feeling great at that time, so I could have missed it. But it's really on the announcers to help you understand what you're watching.
Sure.
And a really good announcer, and I think we saw that in the Olympics, in the gymnastics, like the men's gymnastics versus the women's gymnastics. With the women's gymnastics, and I do not remember the name of any of the announcers, but the color commentator, the person who was the ex-gymnast, the female, the woman that was doing that was just phenomenal at, kind of you could almost hear in her voice how things were. She was like, you knew when something went right or wrong based on how she was talking. And then she would kind of explain why something was hard or wasn't hard and that sort of thing. And then the guy commentator was like, that's 3/10 off and that's a 10th off. I'm like, okay, what?
But why?
A little bit less than vertical there, so that's a 10th off. I'm like, okay, but is it hard to do it with this is it harder? Is there a reason why this is? Are they just arbitrarily scoring points? So, sport climbing also started yesterday, which I was feeling a little bit better for. The guy that they have announcing and his color commentator are, I know both of them from previous thing. He does not do it a lot. He does it occasionally, but he is not the main, like for the IFSC, which is the International Federation of Sport Climbing. They have a guy that does it who is generally pretty good, except that he refuses to say his name and the name of his partner more than once for a 4-hour freaking event. He says it at the beginning, and then you are out of luck if you missed it. Gotcha. So, I'll spend the entire 3.5, 4 hours, sometimes these events will last, wondering who he's talking to. And he refuses to say it. Whereas this other guy that they had on the Olympics, he will say it all the time. So you know at least who you're talking to. And then they have like a rotating cast of athletes who were in the competition and then got knocked out or didn't progress to the next level, who will come sit in the booth with them. Sometimes they'll have the what you call them, the route setters in there to talk about things. And he's even had like the IFSC president up there from time to time. This is the other guy. The guy they had for the Olympics, he had Petra Klingler, who is she was in the Olympics last year. She's award-winning and gold medal at the IFSC boulder champion. She's a very strong climber. She is just okay, in my opinion, on the color commentary. She did not really. She got distracted too easy, if that makes sense. Like she'd start, and this is coming from me. I'm no expert, so she would start telling you something about what was happening, and then the camera would switch, and then she would get distracted by that and not finish her sentence. Not finish
the thought, sure.
And then you would be left wondering what was happening. And this might be the first time I've heard a lot of different athletes. I think they should have gotten Alana Yip. Alana Yip is phenomenal. She's Canadian. She's phenomenal up there. She would have been great. She wasn't in the Olympics this year. Neither was your other big athlete from last time. What's his name? Whose name is dropping out of my head?
But don't know the climbers, so
they did a pretty good job with the climbing. And the problem with sport climbing, I don't know why I'm talking about this. Why am I talking about this?
Yeah, we got a lot more to get to this bucket, and your voice is not going to make it. So.
This is not going. Okay. The sport climbing, the men's, which is what I watched so far, the men's sport climbing, you got to watch the speed climbing. The speed climbing is very easy to understand, and Miroslav, which is her name, is the Simone Biles of sport climbing.
Okay.
Speed climbing, and she is nuts. She is so good that they have to pan the camera back so they can keep both athletes in the frame at the same time. She is nuts. She is so fast.
It's the case for vertical video.
And the last, no doubt. And one of the last things I saw her compete in, she fell and got knocked out early, which is really, in sport climbing, it's very tense. It's the same route every single time. It's the same thing. They've been using the same route for years. They practice on it over and over and over again. So, if you fall, that's it. You're done. Not in the prelims, but in the semis or finals. If you fall, you're out. There's no do-overs. So, very exciting. She's doing well so far, but she is so fast. It looks like everybody else isn't trying.
Yeah.
And as an actual climber who has been climbing for nearly 20 years, I have watched speed climbing and thought to myself, that doesn't look that hard. I could probably do that. And I can climb, if you're listening to this podcast, I can climb better than you.
Okay.
Almost guaranteed. Okay. unless you are very young or very good climber, I can climb better than you. And let me tell you, it is hard to make the first move, much less all the rest of them going up there, and definitely not the speeds that they're going. It is nuts. It is so hard.
It looks like the safety rope that they have on. It looks like somebody is pulling them up by that, because it doesn't even quite look real that someone can go that vertical that quickly.
So those are auto belays. It's called an auto belay, and at your local climbing gym they have those where usually that you can clip into. But for speed climbing, they go so fast, and they've been getting so fast that they had to invent faster ones because they were not keeping up with the speed athletes. That's how fast these people were going. It's nuts. Anyways, I did watch one thing. I went down a rabbit hole on social media and started hearing things about the McCamey house. I guess I'm not supposed to say that whole word because of I don't know, it triggers people. But this guy, Mr. McCamey, whatever it is, he started a haunted house many years ago.
Okay.
And then it has slowly devolved into what can only be called assault. Whatever. So he has recently been arrested on domestic violence charges, which has then snowballed into a bunch of other stuff. But there's a documentary on Hulu about him called Monster Inside, America's Most Extreme Haunted House.
Okay.
It was initially a haunted house. It was initially that's what it was, and then it was kind of basically built up into one of those what do they call it? Interactive horror experiences or something, where you go from just things being weird around you and jump scares to getting touched to even beyond that, where you think they can do things to you. And then I guess is pretty, if you're into that, if you've never heard of these things, you're going to think that all of this is illegal, and to a certain extent you might be right, and what he was doing is definitely illegal.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they keep pushing it because the people who want it, they want the sense of danger, and just like anything else, you don't get the same high the second time that you do it, so they got to keep pushing the envelope, right?
Right. So there is this is a very interesting documentary. It's not very long, and they do kind of address the psychology behind why people want these experiences. He's suing them for something like $8 million or something like that because of defamation or blah, 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 blah. I don't think there's any real defamation going on here. I mean, just reporting because he wasn't charging people to go through his haunted house thing, but he was recording every minute of it. And nobody knows what he does with those recordings. He does some things with them too.
So it's not that he's streaming it online and that's how he actually makes the money.
Well, if he is, he's not streaming it on YouTube. He can't, but might be streaming it on the dark web or something like that. So that's probably how he was making this money, but no one really knows. And it's, people will call him a snuff film maker and that sort of thing, because it's, he claims that 3 people have died.
Okay.
He says that he makes claims that 3 people have died going through his. Is that true? I don't know. There's never been any report. Well, Yeah, but the people who want to go through an extreme haunted experience like that, or horror experience like that, don't see that as negative. They see that, and then for whatever reason, and I don't understand I've never understood any of this. This whole cult of personality that some people can develop around themselves, where people just believe everything they say, no matter how much it contradicts what they just said or how ridiculous it may sound. This guy is one of those guys who's got, and we've seen it in home theater as well with the AV123 guy who would, post, and this is back in forum days before Twitter and all that, from on his forum from an airplane someplace, he would say, making all these wild claims about products that didn't exist, and then get people to sign up for him, and people just defend them, and we still have people who defend specific companies, and then no matter how many times they get screwed by them. So whatever, this guy's one of those dudes, and it's not in the documentary, but he is now in jail and is looking at getting prosecuted for a number of things.
Sounds like
it's very interesting. Oh yes, it wasn't as graphic as I thought it was going to be.
Okay,
like they did show, because he's got all this footage, and it's all they can.
Did they get access to it, or
they got some of it? Because some of it is available in part of his marketing materials, so it is out there. So you do see some of it. So it doesn't look fun to me, but that's just me. I don't know.
All right.
Well,
let's get going here.
This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your questions answered. All you have to do is ask by emailing us a question at avrant.com. Go to our website, find our older episodes, our show notes, our Flickr albums, so you can follow along with the pictures, as well as I guess the audio. I don't know. Sure. My brain's a little froggy.
Tom's
still.
A little foggy.
Facebook.com/AVRant podcast, YouTube.com/AVRant. You can contact Rob directly. Rob at AVRant.com is his social media is at First Reflect. I'm Tom at AVRant.com. I thank our listeners of the week. Is that right? Did I skip anything?
Nope. Okay.
Listeners of the week, we've got Ari, who went to avrant.com, clicked on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and sent us a PayPal donation. Thank you very much, Ari.
And that must be the second week in a row. Thank you very much, Ari, for that PayPal donation. Love that.
Sorry. We also have 129 patrons over at patreon.com/AVRant podcast. Patreon's a service that you can sign up to become a monthly contributor to our podcast. So thank you very much to all of our patrons, including J. Karl. Thank you.
That's right. J. Karl let us know he is one of our 129 patrons over at patreon.com/AVRant podcast. That's where you can go if you'd like to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. We definitely had some credit cards that expired. It was kind of funny because literally earlier this morning I checked, it was at 127, and then between then and when we started recording now, it ticked back up to 129. So some people got the email that said, hey, your Patreon credit card on file must have expired. So that's what goes on sometimes there. But thank you all very much for your continued financial support.
Let's get some, let me see here. What are we at?
Other ways of supporting us? Non-financial?
I guess. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, if you can't support us financially, we completely understand. Support us in some way, and we will mention you here. So, we will mention J. Karl wrote in to help me out. He heard my story about the air compressor at my bike shop that hadn't been drained in who knows how long. It's back in the attic, by the way.
Yeah.
just up there, getting stuck.
Filling itself
filled up with water.
Yep. It's a good way to go.
It's not my problem. J. Karl has worked for decades in the fields of building, maintaining, repairing, and upgrading equipment used to manufacture semiconductors, optical coding, sensors, disk drives. Is it MEMS? Am I supposed to say MEMS?
Micro electromechanical systems, yes.
And more. And compressed, clean, dry air plays an important role in almost all of his work. So knows a thing or two about air compressors. Thank you, J. Karl. He sent along a couple of quick suggestions that could upgrade and improve the air compressor at the bike shop, and they might even be something the shop could advertise, so he hopes that might help. So thank you. I will send those along to the owner, and he is... Okay.
Maybe not going to spend the money to get these things?
No. I have no idea what he will or will not do, but what he does love is to tinker with stuff and to change things.
Okay.
And he also likes to like manufacture his own things and to, he's one of these guys who's like, Tom, if you have a lathe, you can build a lathe. I'm like, what? He's like, you can build a lathe from a lathe. I'm like, what? I'm like, are you gonna? He goes, no, maybe, but probably no. I'm like, jeez, okay. So there is a good chance that I'm going to send this email along to him. And there's a very good chance that he's going to want to do it just because it sounds cool. So thank you, J. Karl. I do appreciate
J. Karl,
that.
Yeah.
We also got Sasi, who gave us a shout out to Kinetic's noise control. So thank you, Sasi, for talking us up to Kinetic noise control.
Yeah, thanks, Sasi.
And we also got notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going through Hurricane Debbie and my yet another in a long line of. I have gotten COVID more than any two members of my family combined. Okay. I think the bike shop is not a great place to go if you don't want to get
it's the interacting with the public. That's what does it.
Dang it. My kids go to school. How are they not getting it? I honestly think my son gave it to me, to be honest with you.
I was going to say, they probably are. That's
yeah. He said, he said he was sick a couple of weeks ago and said that, it was just this, just that, and then he felt fine. And then I said, did you take a test? And he said, yes, but I think he was lying because that's what they do. Anyways, notes of gratitude from John, J. Karl, James, Nelson, Steve, Ari, and Sasi. Thank you for thanking us.
For sure. I'll say those names one more time. John, J. Karl, James, Nelson, Steve, Ari, and Sasi. Thank you all very much for those notes of gratitude and encouragement. They're very much appreciated. And a big, big thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
So in the news, MadVR has announced their new NV Core, which lower the price for entry for MadVR's external video processors. MadVR's $10,000 NV Pro Mark II and $16,000 NV Extreme Mark II remain in the lineup.
Mm-hmm.
That's just an insane amount of money.
It's a lot of money for external video processors, but that's what they cost.
I understand that they're probably worth every penny. As far as I know, they're made of platinum, like wall to wall, as far as I know. But geez, that's a lot of money.
But this is the new NV Core.
Well, the NV Core comes in at a mere $6,000 MSRP, and they're doing an introductory price offer until the end of 2024 for $5,000.
That's right.
Compared to the Pro and Extreme models, the Core steps down to a quad-core CPU. Pro and Extreme both use hexa-core CPU. I didn't even know that was a thing. With less RAM, and the chassis is half the weight, being a 2-rack unit design, and also half the height. I'm sorry, half the height with the being a 2-rack unit design, and half the weight at 23 pounds. Like left off some of those fins.
It's a computer inside. That's what's going on.
Yeah. Inside, there's an NVIDIA RTX 4060 GPU offering 2 active outputs, one HDMI 2.1 and one DisplayPort 1.4a. Both outputs support 4K 120 output, but just like the Pro and Extreme, you only get processed HDMI one processed HDMI input, along with a second HDMI input port that is just pure pass-through. And also, just like the Pro and Extreme, those HDMI inputs are 2.0, not HDMI 2.1. So the maximum signal you can input into a MadVR NV video processor 4K 60, too bad, high-end gamer. Sucks to be you.
This is not a HDMI switch. For whatever switching you're doing, that has to be done external to this video processor. So we're lengthening the signal chain as we go along here, but this just has the single HDMI input that is being processed by this unit. But that's the same across all of the MadVR NV devices. It's not as though the Core is more limited in that way than the other ones, the Pro and the Extreme. And then, you can input 4K 60, but it's HDMI 2.0. You can't input a 4K 120 or certainly not a 4K 144 signal from a high-end gaming PC or from any of the modern video game consoles.
Only one HDMI input for $16,000
on the Extreme. That's right.
So you have to buy one of these for every one of your sources, or put it between your
have a switch first, and then the one output from the switch goes into the single input of the video processor. That would be the signal path. I know.
I'm gonna be honest, I don't love it.
Buying multiple HDMI inputs for a PC, which is essentially what's going on here, is a difficult thing to come across.
I guess.
Yes.
As the name implies, the base model delivers MadVR's core features. Their vaunted frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping for HDR10 with contrast highlight and shadow detail recovery, chroma upscaling, edge detail enhancement, and AI-based upscaling. MadVR's non-linear stretch options for any screen aspect ratio and automatic image resizing to make sure subtitles never fall below the edge of your screen. And MadVR smooth motion algorithms, plus their advanced 3D LUT calibration controls with standard built-in test patterns. There you go.
So that's everything you're getting in the core. I mean, we got a whole chart that I'm showing on the YouTube video, and you'll be able to access if you come to avrant.com or just check out the show notes. We'll have a link to this comparison chart between all of these things. But yeah, the core honestly has a lot of features in it.
I mean, this is 3 pages.
That's right.
It's a lot of features. Seems like too many features. For most users, that's probably all the MadVR features they were looking for anyways, but for some additional specific features, MadVR is offering an optional $1,000 premium pack add-on.
Yep. We're back up to $6,000 now if you get it at the introductory $5,000 price.
That's right. We disabled some features just so that you have to pay to get them enabled.
That's kind of what's going on here, yeah.
it's just...
They didn't change the hardware on the inside of the box.
I'm just... Oh, God. The premium pack adds full subtitle repositioning control as well as direct IP control over JVC and Sony projector lens memories. It adds AI-based... Stop calling things AI. Based artifact and noise reduction, as well as grain and banding reduction options. It's just algorithm. It's just an algorithm. Yeah. It's the same thing we've always had. It's not AI. You can't talk to it. Stop calling it AI. And you unlock more custom installer integration features as well that you can't use or won't want to use, as well as unlimited profile storage slots, of which you will use maybe 2, and MadVR's advanced built-in test patterns.
That's
even
right.
Better than the regular ones.
Better than the standard ones. They must be. They're called advanced.
They're called advanced. Can you imagine?
You get this one. You get a longer warranty too. Forgot to mention that. If you pay $1,000 for the premium pack, the core comes with a 2-year warranty. The premium pack doubles that to a 4-year warranty. Whereas the Pro and the Extreme, they come with a 5-year warranty anyway for their $10,000 and $16,000.
That essentially puts its features on par with the MV Pro Mark II model. About the only reason to spend thousands more for the Pro are a couple of more 3D specific features, a nicer backlit remote. Can you imagine using a remote? And the promise of some future AI features that the core model might not get due to its lower powered CPU. The Extreme Mark II exists for 8K fans and the folks that want every possible AI feature, including MadVR's Motion AI per pixel motion interpolation, which is exclusive to the Extreme Mark II model. And that's about it. Okay.
Yep. Don't be mad at me, Tom. This is the case.
I'm not. And I'm not even really mad at them, to be honest with you. This is a product that I know that people love.
Yeah.
Okay, but again, this is very much tips over into the cult of personality thing I was railing on about a few seconds ago. Because when people get this thing, okay, I've been driving a Jeep. And people are waving at me, and I don't like it. Stop it. All right. We are not part of some weird exclusive group of people just because I bought a Jeep. Same thing with you and your MadVR thing. You are not part of some elusive elite group of people who really care about video and now have something so much better than the rest of us.
Sure.
You're not. You're just some person who spent a bunch of money on a device that does something that's kind of cool sometimes, but most of the time just sits there being useless, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I mean, so here the things that I really like and are included in the core, you don't even have to pay for the premium pack to get the things that I really like, which is that very advanced 3D lookup table. If you want the utmost accuracy in your color reproduction, if you want to 100% maximize what your display is capable of doing as far as Rec 2020 color and color volume as well, right, which is the color saturation mixed with the luminance level, if you want to completely maximize what your display is able to do in those areas, maybe for professional purposes or semi-professional purposes, or you're just that level of enthusiast that you want to do that, with all of the displays that we buy, if you're using the built-in consumer software, if you're doing something like watching an Ultra HD Blu-ray, and it's using the DCI P3 color gamut, but inside of a Rec 2020 color container, your display is going to do whatever the manufacturer's decided as far as mapping the color points that are coming from the signal to your display. And most of them will have like a DCI P3 color mode. But your display, just in terms of like what colors is the hardware of your display capable of showing, and they'll call that the native color gamut, those might well go beyond the capabilities that the built-in software that came with from the manufacturer mapped, to that hardware. So this can unlock all of that. You can put your display into its native color mode. You can turn off all of its, gamma processing and everything like that, if your display allows such things. But many consumer displays actually do these days. And then you can let this MadVR video processor handle all of that to completely maximize what the physical hardware of your display can do. So I like that feature, and I very much do like the frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping for HDR10 that this has, because there are lots of displays that either don't have frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping of their own, or if they do, you might not like the particular curve and profile that the manufacturer has applied, and this lets you change and adjust that. So, I mean, those are, features that obviously are not for everybody, and certainly nobody needs to have those things to have a perfectly watchable experience, but I like that those things exist, and the Core gives you that at currently $5,000 at the introductory price. That's a lot of money to spend, but if you really, really care about those things, then so be it. It can also then, of course, be useful for people who have projection setups, particularly people who have opted for these CinemaScope-sized screens that are much, much wider than they are tall. And if you want to reformat everything that you're watching, not lose any subtitles and have those being projected below the bottom edge of your CinemaScope screen, or have things adapt to the movie's aspect ratio to make use of as much of whatever screen aspect and size that you have under every circumstance, this does that. So typically, it is projector owners who love these MadVR NV processors because they're the ones who benefit most from the frame-by-frame dynamic tone mapping. They're the ones who often benefit from that expanded color capability in the 3D lookup table. And then definitely, if you've chosen a screen aspect ratio other than 16:9, there's processing that helps you there. And then the Core gives you all of that. So yeah, for that reason, I certainly don't have a problem with someone who says, these are the things I want. This is the solution that gives it to me, and I'm willing to pay the price for it. And hey, $5,000 beats $10,000, so I'm always happy to see that. Have no problem there. But yes, for the folks who are then out there saying that if you don't have one of these, you're somehow depriving yourself of good image quality, whereas, you're getting like an LG or a Sony or a Samsung OLED that have fantastic HDR frame-by-frame dynamic processing, that have excellent color accuracy, and have a 16:9 aspect ratio, and really don't need any of this external processing to make them very accurate, very, very close to a professional mastering monitor display, then yeah, I'm not going to say that. And then there are the people who really like that detail retrieval. They like that it brightens the shadow detail. They like that it actually knocks down the above white information and makes that visible. Those are optional. You don't have to turn those features on in the MadVR, but some people really, really like it. On the flip side, if you are 100% an accuracy snob, then you're going to be like, well, that's not actually what the signal said to do. I'm strangely seeing more detail in the image now after this processing that the MadVR is doing than I was intended to see. That is not like nit for nit what the signal said to do anymore. You're subjectively enhancing the image, and maybe you prefer that, but it isn't strictly accurate. So it's kind of funny that, sometimes the people who like the NV most are saying, I love how it brings back all this detail that I was missing before. And it's like, well, you're actually seeing stuff you weren't supposed to see below black or above white information. So it's sometimes ironic that way, but I can see the value there as well. That's my take.
All right, there you go. I think that projectors are quickly going into having to go into the niche. I mean, they've always been niche anyways, but they're going to have to go even more super niche because they're getting so expensive.
Yeah.
Because of their lack of scale.
Yeah.
They just don't sell that many of them.
Yeah. Economies of scale are not in their favor.
Trying to keep up with OLEDs and flat panels, which they were already having a hard time doing for years and years, but to try to get an image quality that's even close, they're just they're going to get so expensive that it's just going to get into this point where it's going to be the only people are going to buy them, or with ultra short throw and LCDs and getting so big and everything else, the only people that are going to buy them are going to have to be people who have drank some sort of Kool-Aid, and those are the people that you sell ultra high-end video processing devices to.
But I mean, hey, there's a whole market of people buying $100,000 speakers, so $5,000. What's that? That's a drop in the bucket.
Yes, you don't have to. Yeah, you're right. You're right. They're also buying $100,000 trucks that aren't very good trucks. So there you go. Value Electronics held their annual TV shootout again, and spoiler alert, Sony won yet again, but there are some caveats to be aware of this year. First up, they decided to separate OLEDs and LCDs. So they crowned both the King of OLED TVs and the King of LCD TVs, and Sony won both. The field of competition was much smaller this year. Only Sony, LG, and Samsung agreed to participate, so Hisense and TCL weren't even in the running by their own choosing. I wonder why.
They haven't won the previous years, so I guess they figured, why bother?
Well, it's not like they're going to go out there and buy those TVs. They ask for them to be sent in.
Sure.
So, yeah. So the site only include TV models that are available for purchase in the United States, so Panasonic and Philips weren't a part of this year's shootout either. The Sony BVM HX3110 dual-layer LCD professional mastering monitor was used as the common point of reference. Okay, so the shootout was all about how closely the consumer TV models came to that professional mastering monitor. They did have both darkroom and bright room scenarios, but this wasn't about subjective preference or additional processing options whatsoever. And under those conditions, Sony's stated approach of trying to match their own mastering monitors as closely as possible seemed to have paid off. Despite being a 2023 model carried over to 2024, the Sony A95L QD OLED took the OLED crown, with their brand new Bravia 9 mini LED TV took the LCD crown. Samsung's S95D QD OLED with its matte screen finish squeaked out a win in the bright room performance category, and their QN95D QLED model handily took the bright room category for LCDs. LG brought up the rear across the board with their QNED 90T not really coming close as far as LCD TVs go, but their G4 model was not far behind amongst the OLEDs. So you really can't go wrong with any of the flagship OLED models, whatever.
I mean, people always debate this endlessly, and they'll go, oh, if you don't get the Sony, then you're getting a worse OLED. But, like, please understand that it was the most splitting of hairs between the OLEDs that it was like, yeah, absolutely get any of the good OLEDs and you are getting a fantastic image. It really does not matter which one you get.
So this is why most news outlets that are serious about doing reviews don't do shootouts.
Sure.
We talked about this before. No one wants to come in second, and no one cares that they got a good review or they got a good write up. But you say, oh, but this one slightly eked it out because of this thing. That it doesn't make any difference what your excuses are.
Right?
They want to win.
Winner. Yeah.
Yes, they just want to win, and if they don't win, then they don't participate again. And it's just bad for business, really. It doesn't help you, and as a consumer, it doesn't actually help you, because now you're looking at this and going, well, Sony's make the best TVs, because people are just going to just read the headline or skim it and say who won? Oh, Sony won.
Oh, absolutely.
They're not going to.
All the headlines are Sony crowned King of TVs for third year running. Yeah, that's absolutely the headline. Yeah.
Pretty soon, Sony's going to be the only one running at all, and then that'll be it.
Right.
So,
but I mean,
it won't make any
there is
difference.
that huge caveat of, like, there are lots of people that would just look at any YouTube comment section of any TV review, and there's a huge swath of people who are like, I don't care about absolute accuracy to the industry standards. Which one, like, wowed you the most? Which one did you think had the best motion processing? Like, and you know what? Those are perfectly fine things to care about. I don't have any beef with someone who's like, I like for me, I like to know which TV is capable of being the most accurate and is capable of adhering to the industry standards as best as possible. I want that to be my starting point. But if someone's just like, well, yeah, but then I watch in a sunlit room, so I don't care. Like I just want the one that's brighter. So it's valuable for them to be able to say, okay, the Samsung, that clearly won the bright room competition, and that could very well be the thing that, makes somebody buy that instead of the Sony. Easily, that's a very, very valid reason to do so. But if all you see is the headline, Sony is king of TVs, then yeah, that's the issue.
And that's what it comes down to is, Samsung at the end is not going to be like, oh, well, at least we won something. They're not going to care about that.
That's right. They are not the king of TVs.
They're not the king of TVs. That's the only thing that they care about, because that's what people are going to see. And like I said, it doesn't really help anybody. It doesn't help you as an outlet. It doesn't help you as them as a manufacturer. It just doesn't help. Comments. John. A couple of months ago, John wrote us to get our advice about which projector model he should replace his 1080p Epson 2050 based on price and some other factors. He decided to go with one of our highly recommended suggestions, the BenQ HT3560. Rom mentioned that you can pretty much take the projector out of the box at the filmmaker mode and basically be done as far as settings go. And he agrees. Looks great, he says, and it was a breeze to set up.
Hooray!
But there was one little wrinkle. Mm-hmm. About a week into it, there was a smudge on the bottom left side of his screen. At first, he thought maybe someone's hand had touched the screen. But he carefully examined things. It turned out the smudge moved when he tapped on the side of the projector, and it wasn't just a dirty lens. Thankfully, he had purchased it from B&H Photo, and both the original ordering process and getting them to exchange the one with the smudge for a new one were great customer service experiences. He had a replacement unit within a week of calling them, and it only took that one call, not a bunch of back and forth like some places. And now he's had a perfectly functioning BenQ for a couple of months and loves it. He just wanted to write us and say thanks. You're welcome.
You are very welcome. I'm very happy with how happy you are with it. It's a fantastic, $1,500, and it's 4K, HDR capable, surprisingly good looking projector at that price. So I like it a lot. It's, DLP based, but has some vertical lens shift. So it's not as though you are 100% fixed in its position. So yeah, a lot of things I like about that HT3560. So really glad that John is happy with it. And yeah, sorry you had that, problem at the beginning, but that is one very good reason to buy from an authorized and reputable retailer. And very glad that B&H Photo came through for you.
All right, questions here. Will, about a month ago, one of our listeners in Australia, Raf, wrote in to ask us if there might be some sort of setting he could change to improve the underwhelming audio quality he was getting from movies he's rented through Amazon Prime Video. Some of his other streaming services sounded better and more impressive to him, so he didn't think it was just his internet connection, and neither did we, especially since he said the video quality looked very impressive. We mentioned how it would be worth at least checking the quality and bandwidth settings that you can typically only access via a browser, since only adjusting the settings in the app and the playback device might not give you access to those. But I also instantly responded that it could just be an Amazon Prime thing, where that particular service doesn't sound as good as some of the other services, and we might not really ever know for sure. We'll agree with everything we said, but he's also been watching, AVRant listeners, Jeremy Pyle's Tech Enthusiasm YouTube channel, where he periodically checks a single movie title across multiple different streaming and rental services, and he's able to show the bit rates on screen using his Apple TV 4K set to developer mode. Surprise, surprise, but Apple's own Apple TV app and Apple Movies rentals consistently deliver the highest bit rates for both audio and video. To think that Apple would somehow throttle back other people just to make their own service look and sound better, I am absolutely on the floor.
And we've got to be careful, because we cannot say that is absolutely what's going on here.
No, I don't believe it. I don't believe it for a second.
No,
they are
not shocked.
They've never been known to do anything like that, Rob.
There's
never been any evidence.
Their own app and their own service gets the highest bit
They've
rates.
never pushed an update that did something like throttle back your battery life on your older phones that you have to upgrade. That's never happened, and I would fight anybody that would suggest otherwise.
Gotcha.
Apple is, really, they make the best Kool-Aid. I think we can all agree on that.
No cult of personality around Apple, not never.
That's right. And Amazon Prime Video in particular almost always has the lowest bitrate, with the audio often being 4 times less data than the same movie played from Apple Movies. So that's really just an Amazon problem. I mean, obviously Amazon just doesn't know what they're doing. But some viewers respond that if you use a different hardware device, like say an Amazon Fire TV instead of an Apple TV, then there might be a much smaller gap, or the situation might even be reversed. The problem is that it's a lot harder to find hard numbers and reliable data from other streaming boxes, so it's just a lot of anecdotal claims. Let's just say that I imagine that in the future, Apple TV 4Ks might not give you this information anymore, but I don't know.
I mean, you do have to, have a Mac and then put it into developer mode, and it's not exactly just in the normal user menu.
That's right. So in that particular question and answer section with Raph from a month ago, it was never mentioned which streaming device he was using, just that if he decides to rent a movie, he usually does so through Amazon Prime Video. Will thinks we should encourage Raph to change his habits. Do we agree? I mean, give it a try. At the very least.
Well, there's the whole thing of if you care about having the very best audio and video bit rates, well, then if you're not getting it, then something has to change.
Yeah. If you primarily rent through one service and they offer a streaming box,
sure, you
might consider buying said streaming box. I mean, I think that's not a terrible idea.
Yep. And look, Amazon Fire TV, 4K sticks, and even the 4K Stick Max, and even the Fire TV Cube, they're not crazy expensive devices. So, if he was using some other streaming device or just using the built-in apps on his, smart TV, and prefer to use Amazon Prime Video. So, there's the two choices, right? Either you get the piece of hardware that is the most likely to deliver the very highest bit rates possible from that particular service, or you change which service you use to rent your movies. Those are the two choices. If you are dissatisfied with the current audio and video quality, and that really matters to you. So all of those things put together could lead to a change is really the only way this is going to get fixed. Yes.
Yes. Jeremy's test on his Techthusiasm, I have a hard time saying that, channel seemed to provide pretty compelling evidence that if you want the best audio and video quality with the highest streaming bit rates, using an Apple TV 4K to stream rentals from Apple Movies in the Apple TV app pretty much guarantees that for that particular combo of hardware service and service provider, at least. Sorry. And we don't have good data and hard numbers on other streaming boxes, so why not go with the combo that we know for certain is good? These are rentals, after all, not asking Raph to repurchase an entire digital library in a different service. So I guess that's a question. Is that a question?
Well, yeah. So, it all just leads back to do we agree? On that one, I have to say, if someone has opted not to use Apple Movies, then I'm not going to try to convince someone to use Apple Movies. Because, whatever streaming device Raph has been using, accessing the Apple TV app and accessing Apple Movies and rentals within that service is almost certainly an option. There's hardly anything out there now streaming-wise that doesn't allow you to access the Apple TV app anymore and Apple Movies within it. So, if I don't know what the reason is that he prefers Amazon Prime Video. Maybe he's got discount codes. Who knows? It could be any number of things. But for anyone who hasn't chosen Apple to do it, there's very often a resistance there for whatever reason that they might have to not do it. So maybe that's not the case. Maybe it was a case of just being unaware. I don't think that would be true in Raph's case. Raph is a pretty knowledgeable person when it comes to home theater and doesn't make these selections just completely willy-nilly. But nevertheless, if it was a matter of being unaware, then sure. We have this evidence, at least, of one combination of hardware and service, all from the same company, Apple in this case, where they have evidence of high bit rates going on with those things. So if that's enough to convince you, then I'm on board. But also, if Raph had his reasons for not choosing Apple in this case, I'm not going to try and convince him to change that.
Yeah. Nelson is upgrading his home theater system to a full 7.4.4 configuration and maxing out the capabilities of his Den X3600H. Since the 3600H has 9 amplifiers built in, he has to power 2 of his 11 speakers with external amplification, so he's decided to power his front, left, and right Focal Cora 816 towers with a pair of IOTA.
I believe so.
I guess.
IOTA. It's all capitalized, but... Sounds like I own it to me.
VXSA3 integrated amps set to bridged mode. So those will be acting as two 90-watt into 8-ohm monoblocks. This will be his first time running Odyssey with all 11 speakers, and his first time using any external amplification, so he has a couple of questions. How does he prepare the settings in the Denon so that it knows not to power the front, left, and right speakers itself, and instead sends those signals to the front, left, and right pre-outs? So within the speaker configuration, you set amp channels up, which Rob is going to describe to you, but generally speaking, those pre-outs are always hot anyways, so you would get sound one way or the other, usually in most cases, but yes, you need to let it know that you are reassigning those, that because of the fact that it processes 11, you have to tell it which ones you're using the external amp for.
Yeah, there are two good ways that you can go through this. I might actually encourage you, particularly if, this is your first time doing this particular type of configuration, a little bit more complicated than the way that you've done things in the past, using the Denon setup wizard. I know people have aversions to using setup wizards because we're so used to them being kind of crappy in a lot of computer situations, but I really have to give credit to Denon's setup wizard. Of course, Marantz has the same thing. It's good. It does a very good job, and if you actually just follow its on-screen directions, it does a darn good job, in my opinion. Furthermore, you can leave the Denon receiver on the entire time. And if you're following the instructions, read what it says on the screen there. It's kind of important, but it'll actually get you to physically make connections, and it won't require you to power off the AV receiver to, plug in your next set of speakers. You can do that while the receiver is technically still on. It will, when you're going through the wizard and following it step-by-step directions, it will completely cut the electrical connection to either the pre-outs or the binding posts that it's telling you to connect at that time. And it's safe to make those connections with it still on. Just follow the instructions exactly as they say on screen. And it'll get you to where you need to be to make this full 11 speaker setup that you want to end up with. But if you're like, nope, there's no way, no how I'm ever using that setup wizard. And by the way, if you go, if you press setup on your Denon remote, go into that menu there, the wizard is right at the very bottom. If you go to the very bottom section of the menu, I think it's just the general tab at the bottom there. That's where the setup wizard is, and you can access it from there. But if you have already done other things and you don't want to use the setup wizard for whatever reason, if you press that setup button on your remote, you'll need to go to the speakers section and then the manual setup section of the speakers submenu. And there you'll find the amp assign. And by default, it's set to 9.1 because that's how many amplifiers are built in. You will change that to the 11.1 setting. When you do that, you'll have your layout options directly below the amplifier assign. So you'll set your floor level to be 5 channels plus surround backs. That's your 7 floor level speakers. You'll set your heights to be 4, and there's your 11 speakers there. With the amp assign set to 11.1, a new option that is either grayed out or not visible at all, when you choose anything other than 11.1, it will appear at the bottom of the layouts, and it'll just say pre-out. And this is saying, okay, you've got 11 speakers. I've only got 9 amplifiers. 2 of these speakers have to be powered externally. Which 2 speakers are they? And you got 2 options. They can be your front, left, and right speakers, which is what you want. Hooray! Great. That option is there, and you're going to choose it. The other option is whatever are your rearmost overhead speakers. So, those might be labeled as rear heights, or they might be labeled as top rears, or they might be labeled as top middles. Whatever your rearmost overhead speakers are, that'll be the other option. But you're not doing that. You're using the front, left, and right, and that is the option there. So that's all you have to do in terms of manual setup before you begin Odyssey, so that it knows, yes, I'm going to do 11 speakers in this setup, and the front, left, and right speakers are the ones that are most definitely powered externally. You do, as Tom mentioned, have the option of powering any of the 11 speakers externally. The pre-outs are hot. They are active at the same time as the speaker binding post. So if you get another monoblock amplifier and decide that you want to externally amplify your center speaker, you can go ahead and do that. There's no settings that you have to change exactly, although you might end up running through Odyssey again just because you're going to want to redo things now that your center channel has different amplification. But you don't have to change anything as far as the amp assign or anything like that to do that part of things if you want to add more external amps later.
That's right. So the master volume on this Denon shows numbers that go from 0 to 98. And then on the Iota VX amplifiers have their own volume dials and front panel displays that go from -100 up to 0, with everything being negative numbers. Where should those be set when he goes to run Odyssey? He has access to an SPL meter and a UMIC 1 if necessary.
I wrote an article. Meters.
Yeah, you won't need any of that.
Nope.
So I do have an article on AV Gadgets about how to add a amp with volume control. So the step one, hook everything up. Okay, to go through what Rob just told you to do, just make sure that it's got power.
All the physical connections have been done.
That's right. And then set your volume dial on your AV. See, I don't understand why you have 0 to 98 on your Denon.
That is the default. So that's one thing that you can change. We prefer to have what is called the relative volume scale, where almost all the numbers are negative. In the case of the Denon, it actually lets you go above 0. But the idea is that the relative scale sets 0 on the volume dial to be cinema reference volume. And that way, with all those negative numbers, you can tell very quickly when you look at your volume display on the front panel of the Denon, you're like, how far below or above cinema reference volume am I? So if you're -5, well, you're 5 decibels below cinema reference volume. If you're at +5, you're 5 decibels above cinema reference volume. So we like that relative scale. So in that one, if you press setup on your Denon remote, if you go to the audio section of the menu there, the setup menu, one of the things will be volume within that audio submenu, and you can set that between absolute, which is where you are now, 0 to 98. You can change that to the relative scale, and now you'll have that capability. And we like that because, for what Tom's about to say, we want to turn the volume dial on the Denon to 0. And we can sort of end up figuring out, because if you look at the manual, it tells you that the scale, if you go to relative, goes from like minus something or other to plus 18. So that means that, okay, 80
80 should be reference,
your scale
but
should be equivalent to 0. But yeah, we like switching it to relative, because then 0 is 0, and that's cinema reference volume, and we know what reference volume is at that point.
I do understand that people, like, in their brains get kind of almost hardwired to know 0 being no volume and then everything above 0. Yeah. That's the way it is in your car and everything else. So I understand that, but let's change it anyways. Okay. So you're going to set your volume on your AV receiver to 0 or reference volume. Yeah. You could try 80 on yours. It's probably close enough, but whatever. So 0, whatever 0 is. And then you're going to go to your amps and turn their volume knobs all the way up.
As high as they go. In this case, it'll say 0 on their front panels. Yes.
So you'd have zeros all the way across.
Right.
Okay. And then go sit down in your seat.
Yeah, nothing playing. There's absolutely nothing playing at this point. Everything's powered on and physically connected, but there's nothing playing.
And do you hear anything coming from your speakers? Yeah. That's what you have to ask yourself.
You might hear a little soft hiss. You might.
You might. Yeah. You might. And then if that hiss is loud enough where you think, I'm going to notice this during movies, probably won't, but maybe you will, then go to your volume knobs on your amps and turn them down a couple of notches. Go sit back down. Keep doing that until you get to the point where the hiss is not audible at your seat.
That's right.
And then note that number.
Yep.
Okay. And you just for your own sanity, keep the number the same on both amps so that you're not having to remember two different. Even if there's, this one cut out before that one cut out, so therefore blah blah. Don't do that. Just keep the number the same. Yeah. And if one is a little bit, don't worry. The trim levels are gonna, because what we're trying to do here is reduce the noise floor, because the amp itself may have a noise floor. Might not have it. Maybe you get that, turn all the way up. You're like, I don't hear crap. Then you're good. You're done. Okay. Once you get there, then that is your amps are set. Okay. Go back into to run Odyssey. Let it do the trim levels and all that other stuff. You're like, oh, well, the trim levels are going to make the volume go up and I'm not going to hear that hiss again. No, we're just getting rid of the noise floor. Yeah. So your speakers are not ever going to receive, because remember, your volume dial was set to reference. It's as high as it should ever be. It should never be really past reference. Like if you have ever been, I mean, you know what you normally listen to your home theater at. Were you ever above 80? Like on a regular basis? Because I bet you weren't, because same sort of deal. So then you just run Odyssey as normal at that point. What we're just trying to do is get rid of that noise floor, get rid of that hiss. This is just where the amps are being pushed a little bit too hard, just with nothing going through them except for the potential for volume. Yeah. If you were to play music at that point, if you're like, I have everything set to 0 and you played music, would you still hear the hiss? No. Unless it was between songs.
Music,
yeah, it would be masked by the music, and it would be unlikely that your speakers would clip or anything like that. You would be fine, but we just want to make sure that there's no noise floor during those quiet sections of movies, that you're not hearing this like slight hiss in the background.
So 2 really quick things. Audio Science Review did measure those particular amplifiers, and they basically found that if you have them on their front display set to -8. Right, so you're pretty close to 0, only 8 notches down. Yeah. But if you have them set to -8, that, just electrically speaking, is where they're at their nominal gain. Above, so if you go to -7, -6, all the way up to 0, they're actually boosting the signal a little bit in the preamplifier stage. So -8 is the nominal gain level for those. So I mean, if you do just want to set it to -8, that I can guarantee that that's completely safe to do, and that should be doing the thing where you really shouldn't be hearing much noise floor at your seat. If you just don't want to mess with any trial and error, setting them to -8 is almost guaranteed to be correct in this case. So that's a pretty simple way to do it there. The other thing is, he was asking, do those amplifiers need to be set to something specific? Does the volume dial on his Denon need to be set to something specific before beginning Odyssey? And it doesn't. Odyssey automatically takes over and sets the volume itself, and then part of the process of Odyssey is that it changes the trim level for each and every individual speaker channel. So it really doesn't matter if you're using the built-in amplifier of the Denon to power a speaker or an external amplifier that came out of the pre-out. It's going to change the trim level for that channel so that all of the speaker levels are equal to each other at the microphone position. That's the whole point of the trim levels. So you're good to go, and you don't really have to worry about where the volumes are prior to running Odyssey.
Okay. So it doesn't need to put Denon in a particular listening mode prior to running Odyssey. It doesn't need to be direct or pure. No. Just once you put it in, once you start Odyssey, it's going to disable all that crap.
It takes over. And furthermore, after you've finished with Odyssey, you do not want to use the direct or the pure direct mode because those turn Odyssey off. Those deactivate Odyssey when you use the direct or the pure direct mode, so you don't want to use them. If you're listening to just 2-channel music and you just want it to play in 2-channel and have your subwoofers active, while you do that, use the stereo listening mode, not the direct or the pure direct mode, because if you use direct or pure direct, it turns Odyssey off.
Infinite Gary. Well, that $4,000 standalone Kaleidescape Strato V movie player just won't get out of Gary's head, especially now he's contacted a few different sellers and has been quoted a couple of deals at a lower price, or a price lower than the $39.95 minimum advertised price that you'll always see listed at first. Mm-hmm. But when you come right down to it, is it really that much of a noticeable difference? For example, it's pretty much taken as a given that physical Ultra HD Blu-ray discs have superior quality over streaming. I don't like where this question's going, and I'm
You never know. It might surprise you.
It might. Gary, surprise me, please. And maybe if you were comparing side by side or still images, he'd be able to spot the differences. But he's tried just streaming a movie on his Apple TV 4K and then playing the same movie from a physical disc. And as far as image quality goes, when the movie is just playing and he's paying more attention to the story and characters than some random pixel over in the corner of the screen, they both look good, a clean image. Mm-hmm. Sometimes there are noticeable differences in the audio, yes, but even there, it isn't always a given that physical disc sounds better to him. I would argue in the bass, you can notice it pretty easily, but not always.
But I mean, there are those individual cases where we've got these sometimes weird disc releases that, had errors in them or whatever. Yeah. Yeah,
for sure. So is the Kaleidescape Strato V going to wow him? Is it going to be an obvious quality upgrade to the point where he won't question this? For $4,000? I mean, for me, I mean, even if it were $3,000, let's say it was $3,000. It doesn't really, say it was $2,000. You could buy a lot of discs for that amount of money.
Right,
I could buy every disc I'm probably ever going to buy in my life.
Even with the prices of Ultra HD Blu-rays generally going up quite high, even if they cost $40 a pop.
Yeah. I don't buy that many discs.
Yeah, because precisely 0 movies come with your Kaleidescape Strato V player. So that is just the hardware. He's found deals for less than $4,000, but even so, you have precisely 0 movies to play on them at that point, and it will cost you more money to add movies to your Strato, to your Kaleidescape library.
Yeah. I just don't ever see myself. Now, this is not Gary, but I don't buy that many movies. And I agree with you that for the most part, once you press play, I mean, this happens with MP3s and everything else too. You know, people are like, oh my God, the bit rate's so much different. I got to buy this one with the higher bit rate. And then you start playing it. You're like, you're listening to it in your car. What are you talking about, nerd? You know, you're not really if you're in there for the enjoyment, you're not really noticing it unless it's bad.
Right.
You know, we're talking about different flavors of good for the most part.
Yeah.
You know, when we're watching streaming online.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, like if you have 4K Netflix, or if you're getting your movies, he said using Apple TV 4K, and you're getting them through Apple Movies. Like, if that's your experience, it's like I don't remember the last time through services like that. There are certainly some streaming services where I'm like, oh, I can see the macro blocking, I can see the banding, and that is just plainly visible in those images, and that is not a pristine video quality. But if I'm using the higher tier streaming services, if I'm using the good rental service, I don't know the last time I was watching a movie and I'm like, ooh, it just looks bad. Like, no, they look pretty darn good.
Yeah, and that's what I think it comes down to for me. You know, when we're streaming online, even if it's YouTube or whatever, you know, I will sometimes check to make sure that we're getting 1080p or whatever, 720p, whatever it's the native is. And the stream itself was recorded with low resolution cameras or was uploaded in a low resolution. It looks terrible, right? That looks terrible. That just does. But if I'm watching a 4K Blu-ray version of something, a 4K version of something versus a 1080p version, no one in my family, and I would venture to say, including me, really notices until it starts dipping down to, you know, the 540 or whatever it is. That if we get like a bit rate drop or something. Yeah. So yeah, I think you're right on there, Gary. I think that the whole point here is, you know, if you want to. And this is where I really have a problem with these things. If you're like, I want to have the best streams possible, great. Kaleidescape goes out of business. I've lost everything.
So, I mean, there's not entirely, because you do have the ability in Kaleidescape's case. In fact, you're required to download a movie to watch it. So they have said over and over, because they did go bankrupt once already in the past, they're like, as long as you have your movies downloaded to a Kaleidescape server, of course, that would be an additional cost. But if you have your whole library downloaded to a Kaleidescape server, then they don't have some kind of digital rights management that's going to kill your whole library if they go out of business. Whatever you have downloaded is going to continue playing into the future. They've made that promise that they're not going to kill it if they happen to go bankrupt again. But of course, you wouldn't be able to add to your library after that point if they ever do go out of business. Although, hey,
but with that Strato whatever it is, Strato V, you're only getting 10 movies anyway.
You're only storing about 10 4K movies, yes, in general. So
yeah,
you would end up adding a server if you're worried about that side of things. Almost ironically, I don't think the video side of things is at all the incentive to switch over to Kaleidescape. I don't personally think there's a big enough difference in the video quality. I mean, particularly against Ultra HD Blu-ray discs, where it's kind of rare that the video side of an Ultra HD Blu-ray has a lot of issues. Although we're seeing these cases where they really should have used a 100 gigabyte disc and they used a 66 instead, and we're seeing some artifacts, particularly in anything that actually does have actual film grain. Some of that is getting denoised out of things, or just compressed out of things, data compressed out of things. So there's complaints there as far as discs go, and you will not get that with Kaleidescape. With Kaleidescape, you will get the pristine video quality. But yes, by and large, I personally think it's difficult to make the argument that you are just going to be literally wowed every time by the video difference in Kaleidescape. It is a small and subtle difference on the video side. Where I actually care more, and we know Gary cares about the audio side of things tremendously just as we do, I feel more compelled by the consistency of the audio quality when it comes to Kaleidescape, because I'm feeling like there's more variability on the audio side of things when it comes to streaming and rentals and discs. That's where studios don't really seem to care too much and very well might be cutting corners or not doing those final quality checks that they really ought to. And we're seeming to get quite a bit of variability on the audio side of things. Kaleidescape cares. They master their own releases from the mezzanine files that they get directly from the studios, and they are more consistent on the audio side of things, and it's really, really, really high quality, and they master to cinema reference volume. You don't have this variability in the volume level, reference volume level, that you sometimes get between different streaming services, or even the same movie or a different movie on the same service, or the same movie across different services. This weird variability that shouldn't be there if everyone's using reference. Kaleidescape uses cinema reference. You can set your volume once and forget it if that's your preferred level. So that's where I feel personally most compelled by Kaleidescape, is actually on the audio side. But yeah, it's going to be tough to argue that you're literally going to sit down and be wowed every single time.
Coughing's fun.
Isn't it, though?
It's great. I feel so wonderful. All right. Excuse me. Steve has himself a gaming room. He uses a 55-inch TV in there. It feels, and it is...
feels it is the perfect screen size.
All right. He feels it's a perfect screen size for what he wants. Steve, I hate to break it to you. You're wrong.
Must be.
I'm just gonna say it.
I mean, 55 isn't the biggest
I've
that
never
exists.
met a 55-inch TV that I felt was the right distance from a seat, and I feel like your TV is not the right distance from your seat. Hey, 55 inches when we first got them was freaking huge.
Sure.
Don't get me wrong, okay? But then that was when the difference was that was the biggest TV you can get, and then you could get the projection screen that was 120, which was massive, right? So the differences were major. Your TV is not big enough. I'm sorry. It just isn't.
I will say, when it's gaming, it's sometimes nice to be actually able to see the entire screen all at once without having to move your eyes around.
I understand that. He pretty much just uses his PS5 these days, and he'll sometimes watch movies in there too, also using his PS5 as his streaming source or as a disc player. Mm-hmm. He's been getting by with the old 1080p Samsung LED TV, but that is finally getting moved to the bedroom to replace an even older TV that finally gave up the ghost, so he gets to buy himself a lovely new TV for the gaming room, and he wants to maximize what his PS5 can do. Yes. I don't even know if you can get 55-inch TVs that are any good anymore.
Of course you can.
Now, I think they're all terrible, and that's what I would tell my wife.
All of the high-end OLEDs come in 55-inch as an option.
All of the 55-inch TVs are now just garbage. That's what I would say to you, and I believe it. Ridiculous. And here's some Kool-Aid. He has pretty much settled on getting a 55-inch LG OLED right off the bat. Would we strongly advise him to choose something else?
Nope, I would get a 55-inch LG OLED too if that's the size of screen I want. For gaming, absolutely, on a PS5.
Yeah, I would not. I would get something bigger, but whatever. I'm changing the title of this podcast.
I got to tell you, I got a 55-inch TV for my nephew that he only uses in his bedroom, and if I'd gotten him a 65-inch, it physically wouldn't have fit. So, it's for the spot that he has. So there's a case for a 55-inch TV.
You got to be sitting pretty close to this thing as far as I'm concerned, especially if you're going to watch it for movies. This is the thing, all right? So say Rob's right, and you're like, I like the 55-inch because I can see everything and blah, 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 blah. All right, I can get that. That's fine. You know what you do is you have a second seat that's a little bit further away so that you get that TV field of view smaller.
I mean, this absolutely sounds like it's a spare bedroom. He uses it predominantly for gaming. He can probably move his seat.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's why. So you get the bigger TV so that you can get the field of view for movies.
Okay.
So LG then, which OLED's model of LG OLED exactly? He does have a budget to stick to. So the G series models are out right away, and paying less than his maximum budget would be nice. So looking around, the B3 and C3 models can still be purchased, and their price points are lower than the newer 4 models. Mm-hmm. It's about a $500 spread from the B3 on the low end to the C4 on the high end. Mm-hmm. The gaming room is not fully light controlled. Dude, curtains. So if he's playing during the day, it can be a bit bright in there. Is that a reason enough to pay for the C4, which is supposedly the brightest out of the bunch?
Nope, get a C3.
Yeah, I would get a C3.
Yep.
first of all, because the difference between C3 and C4 is minor, right?
Very minor. In fact, I mean, the people who are pointing to like predominantly the RTings, the ratings measurements that show the C4 being a little brighter, it's within the margin of error. That's unit to unit variation. That isn't necessarily that all C4s are brighter than all C3s. It's really, really close. There's almost no difference from the C3 to the C4. There is the 144 hertz support on the C4. C3 tops out at 120 hertz, but guess what your PS5 does not do? Your PS5 does not go above 120 hertz. That's where it tops out. Get a C3. You'll save some money, but you'll get all the features you want. It's brighter than the B series.
And with that money that you save, you can buy some curtains.
Yeah, you get the 4 HDMI 2.1 inputs. The B3 only has the 2, so maybe you do have other HDMI 2.1 sources, whatever it is. But predominantly, the reason I do like to suggest getting the C series is whenever there are firmware updates, feature updates, changes to anything like that, the C series gets them right away. The B series either gets them later or sometimes not at all. So I would just, at this point, the difference between the B3 and the C3 on clearance is so small that I would absolutely get a C3 in this case.
All right, just in general, why do electronics manufacturers have so many different model numbers and often with very little separating them? Is that just to confuse people? Because if so, it is working on him at least. I actually wrote about this on AV Gadgets as well, but we've talked about it here. There are a lot of different reasons why the model numbers change slightly. Now, if you're talking B3, G3, C3, those types of things, those model numbers indicate product lines and then years of, or like, when they were released. So those are substantive differences theoretically, substantive differences between the different models. So you should be able to look at that part of the number and say, oh, this is the C series, so I know it's this quality, and it's the number afterwards tells me what, how old it is. Yeah. So the 4s are the newest, the 3s are, last year, the year before, the 2s are a little bit before that, blah, blah, blah. But the numbers that come after there, that has to do with a lot of different things, including, I think, from the manufacturer side, it helps them track who's selling what. Yeah,
they're very often retailer specific, the string of letters and numbers after the end of that model number and year number.
Right, and not only that, though, but what you see is we price match.
Sure.
This one will price match. This for if you can find a lower price, we will price match on the day. We'll give you $100 less than that. We'll undercut it by $100 or some. Well, they want you to find the exact same model number, and which means that you can't just find another C3 at another place. Right, yes. You have to find another C3.
The Costco version doesn't have exactly the same model number as the Best Buy version versus the Sam's Club version. Yeah.
Right. And therefore, you have to find one that is the exact same TV, but also at the same retailer.
That's right. So and they'll do a thing like, the shade of gray of the back panel is slightly different. So they're not the same TV, even though the performance is identical. Or the remote's a little bit different, or some other meaningless thing as far as the performance of the panel goes. Yeah.
Yeah. It makes no difference to anything other than the fact that.
But even if he's just talking about like, why do they have a B3 and a C3? Like, honestly, according to all the measurements, they're really, really close to each other. Why even have that difference of series? And it's like, well, LG honestly has simplified versus from a few years ago. They're like, okay, we got our G series, that's the flagship normal consumer level. Then we've got these other experimental ones. We got the M series that is totally wireless, right? All you have is a power cable and no other cables that go into the panel. Separate connection box. They'll have the W series that was similar idea, completely super duper flat, and then just this one tiny cable that goes down to a sound bar that you can't disconnect. They'll have their T series, the transparent OLED, completely. The R series, the rollable one, right? So they'll have all of those, but those are all, in the luxury category and not really meant for normal consumers. You got the G series, that's their flagship. You got the C series, that is their absolute bread and butter. That's what most people are going to buy. And then they'll have that B series because they're just like, for the people who are like, man, I really want to get an LG OLED, but I just can't get to that C series price. Is there what can you cut? It was like, well, we can downgrade the internal processor. We can give it a cheaper stand. We can make it more plastic and less less metal, just all the little corners that they can cut to bring that price down whatsoever. That's what they have for that B series. So yeah, I think it's reasonable and it makes sense. But yeah, if you're looking at the string of letters afterwards, then that's all retailer specific stuff.
Yeah, and I understand it is confusing.
Definitely. Yeah, if you're not in it every week like we are.
Yeah. For us, it's the C, B, G is all very shorthand, and we already kind of have in the back of our mind exactly what those letters and number combination means. The rest of it, nobody knows off the top of their head, except if you work at Costco, you know that the one that your specific one goes to you, and that's about it. Patrick's wife wants to get a good microphone for video recording, recording videos.
Uh-oh, here comes a big old
Sorry, I tried. She says she doesn't care how close or far she needs to be from the microphone, but realistically, Patrick is looking at their desk and computer setup and figures she'll need to be several inches away from the mic. Mm-hmm. It's a separate room that she'll be recording in, and she'll usually be able to have the house to herself at recording time, so they aren't too worried about background noise. And you say that. But
right.
You'd be surprised what could
but at least they're
in.
not saying, it's going to be, in a crowded room while a train is going by. They're like,
she'll
pretty much have the house to herself. So, yeah.
They aren't too worried about background noise and definitely shouldn't need any active noise suppression on the microphone itself. Neither of them knows exactly how much they have to spend. We're thinking around maybe $100. Mm-hmm. Could we offer some suggestions above or below the $100 price point? I mean, if you like the way that my microphone, not this one, but
not this
my
one
microphone
today,
sounds,
the normal microphone that Tom uses, right?
The AT 2020. 20? Is that what I have? I can't remember.
Now, you have the original AT 2020 that only connected with an XLR cable. They now have the Audio-Technica AT 2020 USB, which, surprise,
that's the one.
Connects with a USB cable, and
that's going to be more than $100.
Well, it's $130. It's not insane. And he said,
does it come with a stand? That doesn't come with a stand.
It comes with a tabletop stand that's already in there. USB cable. It's USB-C to USB-A, but they include a A to C adapter if that's the only port you have free on your computer. So, it's basically got everything you need out of the box. If the idea is, I want to sit my microphone on my computer desk, it's going to be, a number of inches away from me, maybe a foot away from me. That's a fantastic microphone to use. The AT 2020 USB, $130. So that's, within striking distance of what you were thinking. That's probably my number one recommendation to you. It is a condenser microphone. It will pick up some sounds. If there are loud sounds in the rest of the room, it will pick them up. It is not a stage microphone that you got to get right up close to and speak right down the barrel, like my microphone that I'm going to mention next. But he said background noise, probably not an issue. Not going to be a ton of other people in the house making noises. So that's probably my number one recommendation, the AT 2020 USB from Audio-Technica. I already mentioned it, might as well just say it now. Audio-Technica, sticking with them, that's the brand I use as well. I have their AT2005 USB, which sells you can find it on Amazon right now for $49. So if price is the absolute number one concern, then it's pretty hard to beat that. $49. It also comes with a microphone clip, a tiny little tripod stand, but you wouldn't want to use it in a desktop setup. This is a stage microphone like you would see a singer use. You got to get right up, your mouth right against the front of this microphone, talk right down the barrel of this mic, because it is a dynamic stage microphone and it will not pick up sounds other than what's right in front of it, close up to it. So with this one, it does include the necessary clip, so you could get any microphone stand. You can absolutely just go with an Amazon Basics microphone stand that I think costs $17 right now. Totally sufficient for this microphone. And this also connects with USB, and it has the option of connecting with an XLR cable if you want to. You can even use both simultaneously. So if you wanted to record on two separate devices, one of them USB, one of them XLR, you can do so with the AT2005 USB from Audio-Technica. Any other ones before I mention my last pick, Tom?
I am trying to find... I think that this thing is out of frickin'... I don't think they make this anymore. That's so bizarre.
You're talking about what, Blue Yeti?
The Dark Matter.
Oh, Dark Matter.
The Dark Matter one that I reviewed for AV Gadgets. There's a monoprice Dark Matter mic that my son is using right now that sounds great, and it's like $50-$70 or something like that when it was out. But it doesn't seem to exist.
Yeah, monoprice does get rid of things sometimes. The last one I was going to mention, sometimes turns out you need your microphone farther away from you, or you just prefer to have your microphone farther away from you than you might have thought, to the point that even with a condenser mic like the AT2020, when you listen back to your recordings, like, I kind of sound a little bit far away from that microphone. If that's the case, then a shotgun mic is what you want. These are super directional. They need to be aimed right at your mouth. It's why on movie sets where they use shotgun microphones, you have the, person holding the microphone above the actors' heads and aiming it at the mouth of whoever is speaking at the time, someone who is actively doing that. So this is not a microphone that you want to set down and then move around a whole bunch. It needs to be aimed at your mouth. But Rode, probably the very best brand when it comes to shotgun microphones, they have a fantastic Video Mic Go 2. It costs $100. It's right there at the price that you talked about. It comes with a shock mount that you can mount onto any microphone stand or tripod, and it does a fantastic job for $100. Connects via USB. Plug and play with any computer or your phone or anything else you might want to plug it into. Works fantastically. But yes, this is one where you have to have it aiming at your mouth and not move around a whole bunch.
So the one thing I will say that just in general, if you are, I don't know what you're recording. Right. Yeah. But just know that these microphones, except for the shotgun one, are going to be picking up external sounds. And just like we talk about bass going through the structure of your house, noise goes through the structure of the microphone. Yeah,
if you're typing on the keyboard that's on the same desk as the microphone stand, then that's all going to get into the mic.
So you're going to want to look at, you do some tests and do some like real tests, not like, oh, I just set up the microphone, talked into it, and it sounds really good.
Right.
Do more than that. Do like an actual, this is what I might be doing. This is how I might be moving. I talk with my hands, that sort of thing. Yeah. Get all of that stuff done, because you may have to invest in either a boom arm.
Yep.
And even with that boom arm, you may need a shock mount attached to that to make sure that vibrations, because you see how if you've ever watched the YouTube video, I normally have my arm over my microphone stand. The microphone stand's kind of in my way, so I need to get my arm in, or I'll keep hitting the microphone stand, and I have a shock mount on the mic as well. So that increases the price of all these things, because I think that you're going to end up getting that anyways. If you do want good audio, if you care about good audio, get the Audio-Technica, just hands down, and then realize you may be spending even more to get the right mount and everything else with it.
Yes, possible.
Shawn, how are we doing time here? Shawn wants to get a full motion TV wall mount, something that is good quality but at a reasonable price. It should be able to handle a 75 to 85 inch TV. What do we suggest? So, as much as TV wall mount people and the public love to talk about the size of the TV as being how you pick your wall mount.
Sure.
It is not. It is the same thing when adults come in and they say they want a bicycle with a 26-inch wheel. It's like, that doesn't tell you anything about the bike. It tells you about the wheel, and that wheel is often how people measure kid bikes, but that's the same thing. We're like, that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't tell you how big the bike is. It just tells you how big the wheel is. You really want to know how much weight the TV is, so that you can pick the right wall mount for it. So a lot of times people have these old wall mounts and they say that the wall mount itself was only good for a TV up to 55 inches. Well, that was a plasma TV. And that thing weighed a few pounds. And now that same mount, which was only rated up to 55 inches back in whatever year it was bought, now can easily handle a 75-inch TV. No problem. Because it's even lighter than that 55-inch plasma.
Yeah, weight is definitely the thing we worry about with the
we
TV
really kind of
mount.
need to know more so than, what we would assume that a 75, 85-inch TV, we can kind of guesstimate the weight on, but that's really what you're looking at. You want to look at the weight of the TV and the weight of, and with the rating for the wall mount.
If you do, though, like look at a modern TV wall mount that says, we're good up to 85 inches, it's going to be rated for 130 pounds. Like across the board, they're pretty much all rated for 130 pounds. Pretty rare to find a 75 or 85-inch TV these days that weighs more than 130 pounds. So you're pretty safe that way. Got a few options that I'm going to mention to you. If you want the beefiest sturdiest and also pulls out from the wall farther than a lot of others, 28 inches away from the wall in this case. And on the flip side, gets closer back to the wall when you push it right back against the wall, 2 inches in this case. So, that the front of the screen is anywhere from 2 inches to 28 inches in front of your wall, sort of one of the bigger ranges, and has covers for everything, so you don't see any screws, you don't see any wires, anything like that. Then Sanis, in their Elite series, has their BLF 328 that's available from Best Buy for $300. Now, that's a lot of money, but the whole idea is this is the beefest, sleekest, longest extension that you might look at. You can level the TV after you've already mounted it. It's got a wide connection, so you can be absolutely sure that you're going into studs, which you 100% want to do with a 75 or 85-inch TV. That's also going to be cantilevered out from the wall on this mount. So I know $300 is a lot, but if you want the top quality, it is by no means the most expensive full motion TV wall mount, that has all of those features and has that kind of range. In no way is it's one of the better values at $300. So I'm just throwing that out there as the absolute top end choice. The one I'm probably going to suggest to you is Echo Gear's Max Motion. You can get that from Amazon for $110. Doesn't have quite exactly the same range. 25 inches it can extend instead of 28, but that's almost certainly enough. Has the same weight rating as the Sanis, but doesn't look as slick. So when you pull your TV out from the wall, you're going to see the leg bolts in the part that connects to the wall. That's going to be visible behind the TV, whereas in the Sanis, that's all covered up and made all sleek and everything like that. But for $110, the Echo Gear comes closest. It just doesn't look quite as fancy and obviously costs a lot less. If you're just like, I got to get it to under $100, then over at B&H Photo, they sell the Gabor brand. It's really, really similar to the Echo Gear, but when you push it back against the wall, it's not as flush to the wall as the Echo Gear or the Sanis is, and it pulls out 22 inches, not 25 or not 28. So, you're getting less range with the Gabor, but that gets your price down to $90, same weight rating, so any one of those will do the trick here.
All right, so over at AV Gadgets, Andrew reviewed the monoprice full motion articulating TV wall mount, whatever. 43 to 90 inch flat and curved TVs up to 132 pounds. So I guess it'll sit 3 inches off the wall, it looks like, and it extends up to 16.9 inches from the wall.
Okay, so shorter
this
range.
does have shorter range, but it's only $60.
Okay.
And so it all kind of depends on what you're looking for as far as
it does. How far you want to be able to pull it out.
This does have a cover across everything. Okay. It does look like a mount. I mean, I don't know what people expect other than those frame TVs that kind of countersunk into the wall. But for most things, you're going to see a mount. But $60 right now over there. Cool. There you go. Henry bought a 55-inch Sony Master Series OLED back in 2021. He uses it in his office spare bedroom where he works from home, and he tends to have the TV on all day, every day, playing a news channel or sports. Hello, burn-in.
That's coming up.
He's under the impression that OLEDs had mostly solved the burn-in issue, but those static channel logos and news chyrons are apparently still a problem. They've imprinted themselves to the point where they're too distracting for him to ignore whenever he's actually looked at the TV to pay attention to what was on. He went out and bought another OLED over the weekend, a Sony Bravia 8. For one thing, he uses a universal remote system that was all done by a professional installer. They didn't provide him with the means to reprogram any of the commands himself, so he needs to stick with Sony since those remote control codes are already in the system. Those won't work forever, by the way. Or pay for an installer to come and change the remote codes for him. And second, even though this office TV is mostly playing in the background while he works, he does actually watch and pay attention to it, and he just can't seem to accept anything less than an OLED anymore. In this case, I totally would, but whatever. Right. But of course, he has some nagging doubt in his mind now. He'd prefer if his TV lasts. He prefers if this TV lasts at least 5 years. He doesn't want to replace it every 2 to 3 years. So are there some settings he could adjust on his new Bravia 8 that would help prevent burn-in as much as possible? And if we really, really think he should exchange it for an LCD with full array local dimming, what we would recommend preferably from Sony? Again, yes, you're more likely that if you stick with one brand, your remote codes will mostly work.
Sure.
Okay, That is true, but it is not a guarantee, and it is not a guarantee that they will work forever either. Things change over time. And
although, I mean, honestly, the Sony codes have worked for decades at this point. So
just, if there's a specific button that they come out with that's new, it's going to get a new code or whatever. Yes, that's fine. Stick with Sony. I would suggest getting an LCD. I just think it's silly to insist on having an OLED in here. Are there things you can do? Yes, there's like the pixel thingy where it shifts it around a little bit.
That is not enough for those channel logos and the lower third graphics that are really static. I mean, they've got
I just don't think it's ever going to... I don't think there's anything you can do. If you're going to play this thing all day, every day, it's like I want my... I bought a bed and I want it to last for 20 years, but I also have a child that jumps on that bed 8 hours a day because they're autistic and they can't help themselves and they just jump 8 hours a day, and I'm going through beds every 2 years. Well, I mean, you need a trampoline. Let's start with that. But even a trampoline wouldn't last that long. So, you're using this TV in a way that is really not meant for this type of TV to be used. So they have mostly solved the burn-in problem, but they haven't solved the misuse problem. In this case, this is abusing the TV. Unfortunately, there are TVs out there that can take this abuse, but OLEDs are not one of them.
Yeah, but the only thing you can do is turn that OLED light setting all the way down. In fact, I think Sony in their OLEDs now has relabeled that just as brightness now, which is a bit strange because that always used to mean black level, but I think that's the way they've labeled it now. But I mean, you can turn that all the way down. You can turn on the logo detection, which all it does is dim the image. But I mean, then when you do, glance at the TV, it's going to be really, really dim. So it doesn't particularly make sense to me in this use case to insist on sticking with an OLED. There is the thing that sometimes what we believe is permanent burn-in on an OLED isn't actually that if you run the compensation cycle, or better yet, that the TV itself runs that compensation cycle basically every 4 hours, is what the LGs are programmed to do. It can mitigate a whole lot of what people typically think is burn-in, and it actually isn't truly permanent. The problem is, it seems like LG is the only brand that's doing that correctly on their OLEDs. Ratings has been doing their long-term burn-in test, longevity test on 100 different TVs. I have several issues with their methodology that I don't think is actually making that test completely above board. Like I would 100% trust everything they're doing. Plus, it's obviously a single sample of each TV model. But in general, they have been finding, like the Samsung OLEDs and the Sony OLEDs, they're supposed to be running compensation cycles, but they miss them sometimes for some reason. LG seems to be the only one that's like consistently doing those compensation cycles every time that they do it. Regardless, though, I don't really think you should stick with an OLED. Everything is saying, I haven't compared them in person myself, but there are enough reviewers that I definitely trust to have done it now. It costs about the same to get a Bravia 9. The brand new mini LED LCD TV, but with the mini LED backlight with a gazillion local dimming zones that it has. Sony Bravia 9 just came out, and size for size, they're almost identical in price to the Sony OLEDs. So I would suggest that you strongly consider a Bravia 9 because it comes as close to OLED performance as LCD can. I don't think you're going to be disappointed with the image quality if you get a Bravia 9, and it won't have this image retention burn-in issue that an OLED could have. So that's what I would suggest you get it. If you were willing to pay the price for the Bravia 8, then it's really not more to get the Bravia 9, but you get the technology that I think is going to be a better choice. Yeah.
Sounds good. All right. Let's see what we got here. Aria.
Yeah.
Ari. Yes. I had my wife just bring me another box of tissues.
It was necessary.
I
gotta get those facial tissues. No specific brand.
That's right. It's one of those things that we've all decided that we're all going to call it that, right?
Right.
Ari has a Marantz SR6015 receiver that they say he brought pretty new and is in perfect condition, but he's having two minor issues with it. It doesn't sound perfect. Issues with it that he says are the reason he's bald now.
Yeah.
Okay. The reason I'm bald now is because I learned how to use a razor on my head. One thing should be fairly easy to fix. The other might be trickier. He's using a 70-inch Insignia TV. There's your problem. And he's got... Sorry.
It actually isn't, but sure.
I know. It's funny. He's using a 70-inch Insignia TV. He's got multiple gaming consoles plugged into the Marantz, but his primary source is Apple TV 4K. He does not want the volume to show up on this TV. He can see the Marantz's front panel just fine, and he finds it distracting when the volume readout shows up on his TV. He went through the settings of his TV receiver and sources, and he thought he turned off the on-screen volume option there, but it still shows up in the ideas. Video conversion.
That is the one, and I mean, strangely enough, there is a setting in the Marantz that says on-screen display, right? And he turned that one off, figuring the on-screen display would go away, and yet the volume readout still shows up. So yes, you specifically in your Marantz, press that setup button on your Marantz remote. You need to go to the video section and the output settings within the video submenu and find, as Tom said, video conversion. Not on-screen display. And video conversion, by default, is on. We know that for sure. It even says so right in the manual that by default it is on. And that is the thing that you have to turn off. It does mean that your AV receiver now will not touch any incoming video signals at all. It is a pure pass-through switch at this point. But it sounds to me like that's what you want anyway. So that'll get rid of that volume showing up on your TV screen.
So he noticed that the power cord that came with the receiver is 3-pronged, but when he looked at the back of the back panel of the Marantz itself, the inlet plug only has 2 prongs. Yes. All of his gear is plugged into the same Furman power strip, and he mentioned all of that because his Marantz, and only his Marantz, makes a buzzing sound if he ever touches it while it's on. It's almost like it needs to be grounded or something, but he doesn't really know. It isn't buzzing all the time. It just seems a bit strange, and it's not quite that it's not, but not quite right that it buzzes if he touches it. So the idea was up with that and what he should do about it. Don't touch it. That would be step number 1. Don't touch it.
That isn't quite right, though. Also, he says he bought it almost brand new, so it sounds like whoever you bought it from did open it up at some point. They put in a different power cord, because it should be a 2-prong power cord that comes with that Marantz, not a 3-prong. It doesn't really change anything.
No, I was going to say, that doesn't make any difference. It's not plugged in anything on the back of the Marantz. Right. It should have come with a 2-prong one, but whatever. Sure. It could also be that, I mean, it's not the case, but like Rob said, it doesn't make any difference because that 3rd prong that's plugged into the ground on the wall side of it, or your Furman side of it, in your case, isn't connected to anything on the back of the Marantz.
But that is assuming
it should be grounded.
A perfectly working, undamaged power cord. And I'm wondering if wherever you bought, maybe it was open box special, maybe it was used. I don't know what the situation was, but somebody at some point took out the original power cord and put a different power cord in there. And I'm like, the power cord could just be slightly damaged. It's not the original power cord. It's not out of the realm of possibility that if you replace because I mean, this is just a regular EIC plug, that computer-shaped plug on the back of it. You can certainly buy from Monoprice or Amazon a replacement power cord. I would do that because that's cheap as chips. That's a couple of bucks. And I'm thinking maybe the power cord that came along with the unit you bought just has some damage to it, because that could be the reason that this is happening. That is not out of the question. It could be as simple as, the metal parts inside that grip onto the little metal protrusions on any of the plugs is like a little bit loose. When you touch it, it just wiggles just that little bit. And it goes, bzz, that's all it is. There is no grounding plug like that 3rd prong on the original power cord. So this is not a grounding issue. This is not what's going on here. This is something is futzing with the power supply inside of the Marantz. And for a moment, when you touch it and jiggle it a little bit, something buzzes. I think you probably got a damaged power cord.
And they are cheap as chips, man.
Yeah.
I've been buying so many of them lately because of, try the power cord for my OLED wasn't long enough to get to the, where I wanted it to go. Mm-hmm. I needed a longer power cord for my razor so I could shave my head in the shower. So I wrote an article about using an extension to your own power cord for your AV receiver.
Yeah.
That but basically it's the same. I'll link it up here. It's the same sort of thing. You just want to make sure you get the right gauge, which isn't a problem. 16 gauge is usually fine, and and it just has the right, they're computer. They're the same thing as computer ones.
Yeah,
So
for a nice beefy AV receiver like that, I might get a 14 gauge power cord just to be absolutely safe.
But it's not going to make any difference.
So we could start. I mean, there's no way we're getting through all of Sasi's questions because he wrote us a novel, but it is all divided up into distinct things. So if you want to do like one or two, then we'll have a little bit.
Is this all Sasi?
The whole rest of this document is Sasi. So yeah.
Oh my God,
he wrote
that's
an
too much
absolute novel,
Sasi.
but we can do one or two, and then we put a little dent in it for next week.
It's already been 2 hours, man.
And I know, but we had like a 10-minute break that you won't notice in the editing. So.
Oh, but I notice it.
I know.
Sasi, we were called AVRant, and Sasi wants us to rant big time. He wrote a lot, so we're just going to make our way through the best we can, and hopefully provide some discourse. Provide the discourse he's looking for. Let's begin. So Audiolics recently posted a review of the new HSU VTF TN1 subwoofer, and the reviewer, James Larson, included the measurements for both one port open and two ports open, which he took in a wide open parking lot, conforming to the CEA 2010 standards and procedures. Sasi compared the Audiolics measurements at HSU's own CE 2010 measurements results that they provide, and they appear to line up very well, certainly within a reasonable margin of error, since things like air temperature and slight differences in the microphone setup can have some impact. But at 25 hertz, 31.5 hertz and 40 hertz, the Audiolics measurements showed a 2.3 dB lower output than HSU's claims, which isn't earth-shattering, but it doesn't seem to be larger than the margin of error. It actually meant the Audiolics measurement of the TN1 subwoofer as being closer to perfectly linear in its output, right down to 20 hertz, but Sasi still noted discrepancy. So we went back and looked at the VTF3 Mark V HP Audiolics review from 10 years ago. And even though it was a different reviewer at that time, once you know it, the same 2 to 3 dB discrepancy showed up at those same frequency bands versus HSU's claims. So, sorry.
Oh dear.
So, I got to take a drink between. I can't talk this much.
Okay. He's asking, what do we think is happening here? Is it actually fair to compare CEA 2020 measurements that are taken by completely different people, completely different places, 10 years apart in this case? But, like, isn't that what a standard is supposed to be for, right? So,
well, you could be seeing some sort of inherent, physical bias that's happening here between the microphone they're using, the place that they're the ambient air temperature or the air humidity, a bunch of different other environmental factors that could be making a difference systemically with their measurements. 2 to 3 dB difference. Well, I mean, I couldn't really care too much less about that difference at these frequencies that we're talking about, because as a whole.
But 3 dB is literally twice the power. We don't hear it as anywhere close to being twice as loud, but it is literally twice the power. So that is beyond margin of error. When you're seeing a 0.2 dB difference or something like, okay, margin of error, wiggle room. But 3 dB, that is significant in these when you're using a standardized measurement procedure. I completely suspect in this case, I do not have actual data to back up what I'm about to say, but I suspect in this case, because I know that James Larson, Josh Ritchie, other people who have done these CEA 2010 measurements for Audioholics have been very meticulous people, like have really, really followed those CEA 2010 procedures. In the case of James Larson, like he's actually done the get it up on a pole so that you're not even getting the ground bounce thing. Like he'll do that for speaker measurements. Really, really meticulous measurers. I suspect that the measurements that HSU has taken, like maybe they did it in their warehouse, right? And maybe one of the dimensions of their warehouse isn't quite 55 feet. It's like a little bit short. Like there's a little bit of room gain sneaking into HSU's measurements, just because you're right. It's been kind of consistent. It's the exact same frequencies, the exact same amount, all these years, differences. But knowing how meticulous James Larson and Josh Ritchie and those other folks have been in their measurements, I'm inclined to trust the ones that Audioholics has posted as being, really, really strictly adhering to the standards and procedures. If HSU did their measurements inside of their warehouse for convenience reasons instead of going to some completely wide open field, and it just means that at 31.5 hertz, they get a 3 dB room gain boost, but it's consistently that way, like it's always that way, then okay, maybe they weren't strictly adhering to exactly the procedures, but when it's consistent like that, I don't have a gigantic problem with it because consistency helps. You can be like, okay, I know that it's always going to be about 3 dB louder at 31.5 hertz from HSU's own measurements versus something that was really, really strict to the standard. Again, I don't want to besmirch HSU and say that for sure that's going on, but putting those pieces together, that's what I think is probably the likely scenario here.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Like I said, environmental bias,
Yeah.
basically. So this whole back can issue for in-ceiling speakers, now that two of our favorite options have been discontinued. He found some back cans from Atlas Sounds that they make for their own 8-inch in-ceiling speakers that sell for $57 each. The cans themselves have dog legs, so Sasi was thinking they could potentially work for just about any branded in-ceiling speakers, as long as you're willing to glue and seal the speaker drivers into those back cans. He also reached out to some in-ceiling speaker brands and most said their speakers do not require back cans, which is par for the course, but that if you're using an 80 to 100 hertz crossover, as little as 0.2 cubic feet of air is sufficient. So Sasi was thinking maybe for DIY installers, instead of making plywood boxes, maybe just some 8-inch sonotube cut to size could do the trick. Any thoughts on all of that? I mean, anything's better than nothing. I mean,
especially for stopping the sound from getting to the floor above, which is a big concern of mine.
Yeah. It's very easy for them to say they don't require backhands. I mean, it's very easy for them, and that's what they should say.
I don't understand it. Like, don't they want to sell the cases where the fire code requires it? Like, why not just have the fire hood available? How does that hurt them? It doesn't really make sense to me.
I would be willing to bet that there's some sort of research out there or marketing that they've done, like focus group stuff, that suggests that if they offer backhands, people think they need to have backhands, and they'd rather not sell them and sell more speakers than sell them and have people buy fewer speakers because they think they have to buy the backhands and they don't want to buy the backhands.
I guess maybe. I don't know.
That would be my bet. But again, no research, nothing. That's just me talking off the top of the dome. So I would be willing to bet that that's part of it. The other part of it that you could see is they just don't sell that many of them. So why offer something? Why get an entire container from China of these back cans that are just going to sit in your warehouse and never get sold? It's just cheaper not to sell them. So, I mean, I could see their end of it, but I agree with you. If it were, I wish I had a business where I could manufacture things and just say, hey, what's your speaker? Give me, okay, I'll make a backhand for you. Here you go. That would be great. I like the idea of the soft backhands where you just
well, I mean, like, I really like the Dynabox that Dynamat makes. My only issue with it is the stupid price on it right now, because they're charging a pretty high. I think they're like over $100 each, which honestly doesn't make sense. But I mean, maybe it's the same thing, right? They're just economies of scale. They somehow have enough that it's worth keeping in their portfolio, but they have to charge this price on it to make it worth their while for how much the storage costs, right? That could absolutely be the business case what's going on there. So I mean, I love the Dynaboxes for how easy it is to install them, like the retrofit thing, right? It's easy enough to say, hey, it's probably simpler and faster to just build yourself a plywood box, because that doesn't take a whole lot of skill to build a plywood box. But that does mean to get it into your ceiling, you have to cut a pretty big hole. Whereas, the retrofit back can, you just need the hole saw that's the same diameter as the speaker driver itself. And then you have this retrofit back can that fits into that same hole saw size without having to put a whole box up there. So, I mean, there's no reason why on the DIY side you couldn't use like even a thick cardboard tube with enough, insulation put inside of it that you're not going to get any sort of weird resonance, and seal all the edges. Always got to seal all the edges no matter what's going on. But yeah, something like, 8-inch diameter sonotube, that could absolutely work. You're going to obviously seal the back side of it and then seal the driver into it. So there's a little bit of complication there, but yeah, I don't have a problem with that idea.
Yeah. If it fits in the cavity, then you're good to go.
Yeah.
So Sasi got himself a Denon A1H receiver a while ago, and he went ahead and paid for all the possible upgrades just so he could test them all out for himself. The Dirac add-ons and Odyssey Multi-QX, and now he's compared them all. And as far as he's concerned, if you create the same target curve in either system, they basically sound the same in the end. But Odyssey has curves of equal loudness in the form of dynamic EQ, and Dirac doesn't have an equivalent, so he's using Odyssey. Who could have predicted, other than me saying it a bajillion times?
Isn't it wild?
But think of all the money you spent and
That's right.
all the happiness you got. From
Well,
doing
what he
that
does
yourself.
have is peace of mind. He knows.
That's right. He knows. For his particular setup, it's true, and also for everybody else. But just on a purely technical curiosity level, he's seen that Drac employs the use of both fur filters and IIR filters. The IIR filters are only used for the base. He's tried to research and understand the pros and cons of this approach, but if he goes by audio forums and Reddit, he just gets wildly conflicting opinions. On Reddit? Shut up. So what do we say? What's our take on PEQ versus IIR versus fur in general? And are the PEQ filters that people are using with their mini DSP devices to tune their subwoofers inferior to what fur filters can do? Man, it's been a while since I've wrapped my head around fur filters and, well, PEQ. So parametric
let's define
EQ.
some things here. Yeah, because, yeah.
So parametric EQ is literally just boosting or cutting frequencies at a specific point with a, let's call it a width
Sure.
around them, so that which is the Q filter, which Q factor, which basically says I want you to cut. Let's just say you have a bass boost, right? So I want you to cut that frequency at, by 5 dB. Okay, because
Sure.
it's 5 dB too loud at that frequency. But it's not just that frequency that's too loud. It's also the frequencies around it, because it's a room resonance or it's something along those lines. So you cut both those plus the frequencies around it, but think of it like a bell curve. So you bell curve around that, and you define the width of that bell curve to the surrounding frequencies with the Q factor. So that tells you, okay, hey, I want you to cut this frequency by 5, but the next frequencies to the left and the right, or the higher and lower, as it would be in this case, by 4.5, and the next one's out by 4, and the next one's out by 3.5, and so on and so on. It's usually not that. It's not a triangle. It's more of a bell curve, which goes down at I think a logarithmic rate or whatever.
How steep, how wide that bell shape is. You can.
That's right. So that's what a PEQ does. Now the fur filter. Now I don't remember what IRs are.
Just before we say that, so we should say a PEQ, a parametric EQ, is one type of IIR filter, which is an infinite impulse response filter. So an infinite impulse response filter, I mean, all that means is the filter always acts on the signal at all times. Even when nothing is playing, that filter is there. And so what it's doing is, whatever the boost or the cut is of that infinite impulse response filter, it is always cutting or boosting that given frequency by the same amount all the time. So you can have like a graphic EQ, which, unlike a parametric EQ, a graphic EQ has a fixed frequency that you can't change, and it has a fixed Q value that you can't change. All you can change is how much you boost or cut that frequency in a graphic EQ system. But that is also an infinite impulse response filter. Whenever that frequency plays, it is going to boost or cut that frequency by that amount all the time, no matter what the signal level, no matter how long that sound is playing. And a parametric EQ just gives you a little bit more flexibility. You can change which frequency it is that the filter is acting on, and you can change the width of that Q factor that it's acting on. But it is going to apply that boost or that cut. It is going to apply that bell-shaped curve all the time, no matter the signal level, no matter how long the sound is playing. So that's infinite impulse response, IIR, and PEQ. Then we get to FIR. Tom?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
My brain's mush right now.
That is a finite impulse response filter. As opposed to infinite, it's finite. So there we get into time domain. We're saying, hey, we've got this filter, same idea. It's going to have a boost or a cut. It's going to have a frequency that it's acting on, and it's going to have a Q factor around it, a width, a bell curve shape to either side of that center frequency. But now you can determine how long that filter is applied. You can say, hey, only apply this filter for the first 20 milliseconds of the signal, and then either don't apply it at all after that, or decrease the amount of that boost or cut after the first 20 milliseconds. Or you can have it tied to the signal level and say, hey, if the signal level is only at this voltage RMS, don't cut or boost the signal at all, but once the signal level gets higher than that, then start applying that boost or cut, or whatever those parameters are. It gives you additional parameters when that filter is acting in the time domain side of things that an infinite impulse response filter doesn't give you the ability to do. So in the case of something like Audyssey's Mult-EQ-X PC software, Odyssey itself only uses FIR filters, finite impulse response filters. That's all it uses. But through the software like Mult-EQ-X, it can mimic almost any other type of filter. Now, the thing is, that isn't the simplest thing to do. If you want to use FIR filters to mimic an adjustable parametric EQ, you actually have to use like a whole bunch of FIR filters all acting together, because if you want to specify the same wide bell curve that you might be able to do with a single adjustment on your parametric EQ of the Q factor, that might require cascading a bunch of FIR filters across that range of frequencies and telling them to act on all those frequencies to either side of the center frequency, with this amount of amplitude, and you're saying, hey, do it all the time. That's going to be one of the parameters in your finite impulse response filter, your FIR filter. But you might have to use a whole bunch. So it's why a system like Odyssey has tens of thousands of available FIR filters that can be programmed. But if you want them to mimic something like a seemingly simpler parametric EQ, you have to use a bunch of those FIR filters together, all cascading on each other to mimic the same thing. So behind the scenes, the programming that's going on with a program like Mult-EQ-X is pretty darn complicated. You wouldn't want to have to adjust all of those individual FIR filters manually. That would be a painstaking process and take oodles of time, but we have software that can automate that for us. So that's very helpful. So if we go back to the sort of original question, you've got Dirac that uses both types of filters. It can use infinite impulse response filters. It can use finite impulse response filters. Dirac will tell you they predominantly use those IRR filters only in the bass. That makes a ton of sense. That is a very logical thing to do, because we're not going to have very many instances in deep bass sounds where we're only going to want to have the filter acting for a small period of time. That doesn't make sense in the bass, because the bass that we're hearing is like reflecting off the walls. It's this continuous sound that's going on for quite a long amount of time. If the whole idea of using our filters in our processing is to reduce things like room ringing and room modes and reverberation, when we're talking bass frequencies and we're dealing with these reflecting sounds around the room, we don't want that filter only acting for the first 20 milliseconds or something like that. That doesn't make any sense. We're going to want a filter that's active all the time. That's just a logical thing to do. And if we're talking about ease of programming, exactly what I said, now you don't have to program a gazillion FIR filters, or if you have a limited number of FIR filters, you don't have an infinite number of finite impulse response filters, you can now assign the FIR filters that you do have to the frequencies where you want to limit the amount of time that they're active, or the signal level at which they're active. You can assign them to where they're most useful and use these, in some ways, simpler infinite impulse response filters for the frequencies where it makes sense to use them. So I think what Dirac has done in their system is very logical, makes a lot of sense. There's not really much reason to criticize what they've done there. It is not that FIR filters are just across the board superior. They have more parameters that can be adjusted, but adjusting them and getting them to mimic what in some ways is a simpler filter requires using a gazillion of them. So there's absolutely use case instances, and what Dirac has done is made a lot of sense. If we're talking mini DSP, it can apply FIR filters. It has FIR filter banks built into it, but it also has IIR filters built into it. And same idea, when you're doing something like multi-sub optimizer, if you're doing manual adjustments, you don't want to adjust FIR filters. You don't want to do that manually. That would be beyond a pain and a half. You want to use a parametric EQ, because we're talking bass. Again, we're talking where it doesn't make sense to limit those filters to only act over a small period of time. It makes sense to apply those filters all the time, infinitely. So use your IIRs there. I think that's enough for today, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Absolutely.
All right, let me scroll back to the top
For
here.
sure. So Sasi, we know you got a bunch of questions. I've got them written down. We'll talk about more of them next week.
All right. I want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank Ari for going to avrant.com, clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and sending us a PayPal donation, as well as our 129 patrons over at patreon.com, including J. Karl. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Ari, thank you so much for your second week in a row PayPal donation. And patreon.com/AVRant podcast is where you can go to sign up to make an automatic monthly donation. Big thanks to our 129 patrons right now. J. Karl, thank you for being one of them.
I also thank J. Karl again for sending me some advice about air compressors.
Yeah, thanks, J. Karl, for that.
As well as those who sent us notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going, including John, J. Karl again, James, Nelson, Steve, Ari, and Sasi. Thank you for thanking us.
And we actually did miss thanking Sasi once again for the shout-out he gave to us to Kinetics Noise Control.
Oh, sorry, that
gets mentioned later on in the novel that he wrote to us, so it'll get mentioned again next week. But thank you for that one. And then, yes, the notes of gratitude that came from John, J. Karl, James, Nelson, Steve, Ari, and Sasi. Thank you very, very much. We appreciate those. The encouragement is needed these days, so that's wonderful. And a big thanks to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
If you want to get your question answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. For AVRant, I'm Tom Andrew.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.